4 hours. That is how long you are being invited to stay here, and it is not an arbitrary number. In the world Jesus walked through, the night was not measured the way we measure it. There were no clocks on the walls of Capernaum, no glowing numbers on a bedside table, counting off the hours a person could not sleep. The night was divided into 4 watches, and each watch was roughly 4 hours long. 4 hours of darkness handed to one set of eyes, and then the handoff, and then 4 hours more. 4 hours was the length of a single vigil. It was the amount of night that one weary human being was expected to carry alone before someone came to relieve him. And it was in the 4th watch of the night, the last and longest and coldest stretch, the hours between 3 in the morning and the first grey suggestion of dawn, the hours when exhausted men stop being brave and start being honest, that Jesus came walking across the water toward a boat full of people who had been straining at the oars all night and getting nowhere. He did not come at the beginning of the storm. He came in the 4th watch. And the first thing out of his mouth was not an explanation. It was 3 short phrases. Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. So these next 4 hours are a watch. Yours. And the promise of this study is simple enough to say in one sentence and large enough to take the rest of your life to receive. The words that Jesus Christ spoke 2,000 years ago are still capable of doing to your interior life what a hand on the shoulder does to a frightened child in the dark, of quieting the thing inside you that has not been quiet in a very long time, and rocking you down into a rest that goes deeper than sleep, deeper than a vacation, deeper than the temporary silence that comes when the noise finally stops. Not the rest of an empty schedule, the rest of a soul that has finally set down what it was never built to carry. You know the tiredness we are talking about. It is not the tiredness of a hard day's work, which is honest and clean and answered by a good night's sleep. It is the other kind, the kind that is already there when you wake up. The kind that follows you into the shower and sits with you in traffic and hums quietly underneath every conversation you have. The kind that makes a person stare at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, running through a list of things they cannot fix, and then get up at 6 and do the whole day anyway, and then lie down again that night and find the same list waiting, unchanged, patient, exactly where they left it. You can be surrounded by people and carry it. You can be successful and carry it. You can be sitting in a church pew on Sunday morning with a Bible open on your lap and carry it. It is not fixed by circumstances improving, because you have had seasons when circumstances improved and it did not leave. That is what these 4 hours are for. Over the course of this study, we are going to walk slowly, deliberately, and without hurrying through 28 sayings of Jesus, his actual words, the ones recorded in the Gospels, the ones that have been carried across 20 centuries by people in every condition of human difficulty. And we are going to look at each one closely enough to see what is actually inside it. We are going to look at the original Greek, where the original Greek opens something up. We are going to look at the setting, the hour, the geography, the political pressure, the specific human being Jesus was speaking to, and what that person had been through before he opened his mouth. And then, every single time, we are going to bring it back to you, to your actual life, to the specific weight you are carrying into this room right now. This is not a lecture. It is not a survey of Bible verses about rest arranged prettily for background listening. Though if you need it as background while you fall asleep tonight, use it that way and be blessed by it. It is not a self-improvement seminar with a thin coat of scripture painted over the top. It is not the promise that if you believe hard enough, your problems will disappear. Jesus never promised that, and the people who promise it on his behalf have not read him carefully. What this is an unhurried encounter with the voice of the one who said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He said it out loud, on a road, in Galilee, to people whose lives were significantly harder than yours or mine. He was not speaking in metaphor, and he was not exaggerating for effect. He was making an offer, and the offer has never been withdrawn. So settle in. Whatever room you are in, whatever hour it is where you are, put down whatever you are holding. Let your shoulders come down from around your ears, where they have probably been since sometime this morning. Unclench your jaw. Take one breath that goes all the way to the bottom of your lungs instead of stopping halfway, like they have all been doing lately. You do not have to be anything in particular here. You do not have to have your theology sorted, your life sorted, your faith at some acceptable level of strength. The people Jesus said these words to were, almost without exception, in the middle of getting it wrong. Before we open the first verse, one small thing, and I will keep it short because I do not want to interrupt what is about to happen. If these 4 hours end up being worth anything to you, if even one sentence lands somewhere that needed it, would you tap the like button below this video? That is the only thing I'm going to ask you for. It is free, it takes one tap, and it is done. And I want to tell you honestly why it matters, because it is not about a number on a screen. Every like on a video like this one is what pushes it toward the next person who needs it. Somewhere out there tonight, in a time zone you will never think about, there is a person lying awake in the dark at the exact hour you were lying awake last week, looking for something to hold on to. Your one tap is part of what puts these words in front of their eyes. You will never meet them. You will never know their name. But that small, silent gesture is a real kindness to a real stranger. And I think that is a beautiful thing to be able to do from where you are sitting. Tap the thumbs up just below the video. That is all it takes. And then if you would, do one more thing that costs nothing. Leave a single word in the comments. One word for what you are carrying into these 4 hours. Not an explanation, not the whole story. Just the word. Grief, money, waiting, fear, marriage, diagnosis, silence. Whatever the honest word is. There is something that happens when people set the true word down in writing. And there is something else that happens when they scroll and see their own word sitting in someone else's comment and realize they are not the only one carrying it. Leave your one word and then let it go for 4 hours. We will pick it up together as we go. Now let us begin. The foundation, what Jesus actually meant by rest. Before we open the first of the 28 sayings, we need to deal with a word, because if we do not deal with it now, half of what Jesus says over the next 4 hours will slide past you without landing. The word is rest. And the reason it needs attention is that the English word has been worn down by ordinary use until it means almost nothing. A nap, a day off, a break, a pause in the activity before the activity resumes. When we hear Jesus say, "I will give you rest," most of us hear him offering a spiritual weekend, a breather, a brief interruption in the fundamental exhaustion of being alive. That is not what he said. The word Jesus uses in Matthew 11 in the Greek text of the Gospel is anapauo. It is built from 2 pieces. Pauo means to stop, to cease, to bring something to an end. Ana means up or again or back to the original condition. So the word does not primarily describe an interval between exertions. It describes the reversal of a condition. Anapauo is what you do to a field that has been planted season after season until the soil has nothing left to give, and you take it out of production and let it lie fallow so that the life can come back into it. It is what you do for an animal that has been under a heavy load on a long road. When you lift the load off entirely and the animal stands there and its whole frame changes because the weight is gone. It is the word used for the deep, restorative refreshment that repairs what has been depleted, rather than the brief pause that merely postpones the depletion. There is a second thing to notice about it, and it is the thing almost everyone misses. In Matthew 11:28, when Jesus says, "I will give you rest," the verb is active and the subject is him, kago anapauso humus. I myself will rest you. He does not say, I will show you how to rest. He does not say, I will teach you 7 techniques, and if you apply them diligently, you will produce rest in yourself. He does not say, I will give you the conditions under which rest becomes possible, and then it is up to you. He says, I will do it to you. The rest is not something you achieve by getting better at resting. It is something done to you by a person. That distinction is the difference between 2 entirely different lives, and I want you to feel the weight of it before we go any further. Almost every solution the modern world offers for what you are carrying is a technique that you have to perform. Breathe this way, journal in this format, set these boundaries, optimize this routine, manage your inputs, and none of those things are evil, and several of them are genuinely useful. And I am not going to spend 4 hours telling you not to sleep well or not to take a walk. But every one of them puts the burden of producing your own peace back onto the same exhausted person who is already failing to produce it. It is one more item on the list, one more thing you are not doing well enough. Jesus does not do that. He offers to do the resting to you. And there is a third word we should put on the table now, because it will surface repeatedly. The Hebrew word behind so much of the Old Testament background to all of this is shalom, and it is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of wholeness. It describes a thing that has all of its pieces, in the right places, in working order, in right relationship with everything around it. A wall with a gap in it does not have shalom. A body with a broken bone does not have shalom. A person who is functioning, achieving, performing, holding it together on the outside, while something essential is disconnected on the inside, does not have shalom, no matter how impressive the exterior looks. When Jesus says, peace, I leave with you, and we will get there in the 7th teaching, he is using the Greek word eirene, and behind it stands the whole enormous weight of shalom. He is not offering you the absence of trouble. He is offering you the restoration of the pieces. Hold those 3 ideas as we go. Rest is a reversal, not a pause. Rest is done to you, not achieved by you. And the peace on offer is wholeness, not quiet. One more thing, and then we open the first verse. The order of the 28 teachings ahead of us is not random. We are going to move through 4 movements. And each one is a stage of an actual journey that souls actually take. In the first hour, we deal with the invitation, the words in which Jesus calls the exhausted to come to him and tells them exactly what he intends to do with them when they arrive. This is where rest begins, and it begins with an invitation rather than an instruction, which tells you something about the character of the one issuing it. In the second hour, we deal with the quieting, the words in which Jesus takes the anxious mind apart, piece by piece, and shows the person trapped inside it what is actually true about the God who is running the universe they are worrying about. This is the long section on worry, the birds, the flowers, the sparrows, the counted hairs, the little flock. In the third hour, we deal with the anchor. The words, Jesus speaks not into calm conditions, but into storms, wind on the water, a boat filling faster than men can bail, a room full of people about to lose everything they have built their lives around. These are the words that hold when nothing else is holding, and they are the words most of us end up needing most. And in the fourth hour, we deal with the deep rest, the words that reach past your circumstances entirely and address the thing underneath your restlessness, which is not really your schedule or your finances or your health, but the question of where you finally belong and whether anything is permanent. This is where we end. Abiding, the shepherd's hand, the prepared place, the last words from the cross, and the welcome that waits on the other side of everything. 4 movements, 28 sayings, 4 hours of your one and only life. Let us go to the first one, and let us go slowly. Hour 1, the invitation, the words that call you out of your exhaustion. Verse, 1. Come unto me, Matthew 11:28. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We begin where every tired person has to begin, with the most famous invitation ever issued by anyone to anyone. And we are going to slow it down until every part of it has been seen. Start with the setting, because the setting changes the sentence. Matthew places these words at the end of a chapter that has been going badly. John the Baptist has sent messengers from prison asking whether Jesus is really the one, which means the greatest prophet of his generation is sitting in a cell having doubts. Jesus has just finished pronouncing judgment on 3 towns, Chorazin, Bethsaida, Capernaum, that watched him perform miracle after miracle and shrugged. He has just observed that his generation is like children in a marketplace who cannot be pleased by anything. John came fasting, and they called him demon-possessed. The Son of Man came eating, and they called him a glutton. This is not a triumphant moment. This is a moment of rejection, misunderstanding, and pressure. And out of the middle of that, without transition, comes the invitation. Come unto me. Notice first who it is addressed to. All ye that labor and are heavy laden. 2 different words, describing 2 different kinds of tired, and Jesus names both because he knows they are not the same thing. The first word is kopiao. It means to grow weary through your own exertion. It is the tiredness you have produced yourself by working, striving, pushing, trying. It is the word for labor that empties a person out. This is the exhaustion of effort, of the person who has been trying to hold everything together with their own 2 hands, and has discovered that their 2 hands are not enough. The parent running on 4 hours of sleep for the 4th year in a row, the person working 2 jobs and still not getting ahead, the believer who has been trying to be good enough for long enough that the trying itself has become the heaviest part of their faith. The second word is fortizo, and it is passive. It means to be loaded down by something placed on you from outside. It is the word for cargo, for freight, for a burden that someone else strapped to your back. This is not the tiredness you made. This is the tiredness that was handed to you. The diagnosis nobody asked for. The family you were born into, the betrayal you did not see coming, the economic conditions you did not create, the expectations laid on you before you were old enough to consent to them, the grief that arrived one Tuesday afternoon and never left. Jesus names both, and in naming both, he does something that religion very often fails to do. He refuses to sort the tired into deserving and undeserving. He does not say, "Come unto me, all ye whose exhaustion is nobody's fault." He does not distinguish between the person who is worn out from doing right and the person who is worn out from the consequences of doing wrong. Both categories are invited in the same breath, on the same terms, at the same moment. If you are carrying something, whether you picked it up or whether it was put on you, the invitation includes you. Now look at what he actually asks them to do, because it is startling in its smallness. Come unto me. That is the entire requirement. There is no preparatory condition. He does not say, get your life in order and then come. He does not say, understand the theology first and then come. He does not say, stop being the kind of person who accumulates burdens and then come. He does not even say, repent and then come, though repentance is real and we will speak of it. In this sentence, the only movement required of the exhausted person is toward him, which is deliberate because he is speaking to people who have nothing left, and an invitation that required strength would be an insult to people who have run out of strength. I want you to sit with that because I suspect that somewhere in you is a conviction that you are not currently in a fit state to come, that you have been away too long, that your prayer life is a wreck, that you would need to clean up several things before showing up, that God is available to you in principle, but that in practice there is an entry standard, and you are below it right now. Look at the sentence. The entry standard is exhaustion. The qualification for this invitation is being tired. He is not asking you to arrive impressive. He is asking you to arrive, and then the promise, and I will give you rest. We have already looked at the word, anapao, the reversal of depletion, the load taken off entirely, the field allowed to recover. But look at the grammar again, because it is the most important thing in the verse. I will give. The giving is his. The rest is not a byproduct of your improved behavior. It is not the eventual result of a spiritual discipline you will slowly get better at. It is a gift placed in the hands of someone who came with empty hands. This is why this verse has been the most worn page in more Bibles than any other passage in the Gospels. It is why it has been whispered in hospital corridors at 3 a.m. by people who could not remember any other verse. It is why it gets said at funerals and at bedsides and in prison cells, because it asks nothing except the thing the exhausted person can still do, which is to turn in a direction, and it offers the thing the exhausted person can no longer manufacture, which is relief. There is one more layer here, and it is the one that separates this offer from every other offer of peace available in the world. Notice that Jesus does not point at a place, a practice, or a principle. He points at himself. Come unto me, not come to a quieter lifestyle, not come to a better philosophy, not come to a set of truths about God. Come to me. The rest being offered is not a thing that can be extracted from him and taken home in a container. It is located in his person, and you receive it the way you receive warmth from a fire, by getting near and staying near. Which means that the answer to your exhaustion is not, in the end, information. It is proximity. You are not going to think your way out of this. You are going to be brought out of it by drawing near to a person who is alive, who is present, who is not tired, and who has been waiting for you to stop pretending you are managing. So here is the first thing to do, in the first hour, before we go any further. Not later. Now wherever you are, come. Verse 2, take my yoke upon you. Matthew 11:29. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. And now the sentence takes a turn that has confused people for 2,000 years, because he has just offered rest to people crushed under a load. And the very next thing he says is, here, put this on. A yoke. Of all the images available to him, he chose the one piece of equipment in the entire ancient world that exists specifically to attach a burden to a living creature. If you wanted to comfort exhausted people, this is the last object you would reach for. So we need to understand why he reached for it, because the answer is one of the most liberating things in the Gospels. A zugos, a yoke, was a shaped wooden beam laid across the shoulders of an ox, or more commonly in a peasant economy, across a pair of them. And here is the first thing to know: yokes were not mass-produced, they were fitted. A carpenter measured the animal, the width of the shoulders, the height of the neck, the particular slope of that particular back, and shaped the wood to that specific body, and sanded down the places that would rub. Because a badly made yoke does not merely fail to help, it wounds. It opens sores on the neck of the animal, and the animal cannot work at all. In Nazareth, in a carpenter's shop, for something close to 20 years, the man saying this sentence had almost certainly made them. Now hear him say, take my yoke upon you, not a yoke, my yoke, the one I made, the one measured to a real body by someone who knows what happens when the fit is wrong. The second thing to know is that a yoke was, more often than not, built for two. And when a young ox had to be trained, it was not sent out alone into a field to figure out ploughing by trial and error. It was yoked alongside an older, experienced animal that already knew the work, already knew the pace, already knew where the rows were. The young one was not carrying the load by itself. It was walking beside something stronger, and the beam across both their shoulders meant that the weight was distributed and the direction was set by the one who knew where he was going. Put those two facts together, and the sentence stops being a contradiction and becomes the whole gospel in a farming image. Jesus is not saying, "I will take your load away and give you nothing to do." He is saying, the load you are dragging alone, in equipment that does not fit you, in a direction you chose in the dark, is going to be exchanged for a load that is shared, in equipment made for you, going somewhere I have already been. This matters because most of us do not actually want a life with nothing in it. We were made for work, purpose, effort, love, and every one of those has weight. The problem was never that your life has weight. The problem is that you have been bearing it in isolation, on a frame that was not designed for solo carrying, while being told by everything around you that a strong person handles it alone. Jesus offers not the removal of all weight, but the end of the isolation. My yoke, beside me, at my pace, then and learn of me. Mathete, from which we get the word disciple. Learn from me, be apprenticed to me. This is not classroom language. In the ancient world, a disciple did not sit in rows taking notes. He walked with his teacher, ate with him, watched how he answered when he was insulted, watched what he did when he was tired, learned his rhythm by proximity over time. Jesus is inviting the exhausted person into an apprenticeship in his own way of being alive. And then the reason, which is the most personally revealing sentence Jesus ever spoke about his own interior life. For I am meek and lowly in heart. Meek is praus. It's not weakness, and it's not passivity, and every generation seems to have to relearn this. Praus was used of a horse that had been broken to the bridle, an animal of enormous power, whose power was now entirely under control and directed toward purpose rather than spent on panic and self-assertion. Meekness is strength with its hand off the trigger. It is the capacity to devastate, held in restraint, on purpose. Lowly in heart is tapenos tachardia, not lowly in circumstance, not lowly in status, lowly in heart. The disposition of a person who is not maintaining a position, not defending a reputation, not requiring anything from you in order to feel secure. Do you understand why he tells you this at exactly this point in the sentence? He has just asked you to be yoked to him, which means you are going to be near him, constantly, at close range, for the rest of your life. The single most urgent question any exhausted person has about coming close to God is, what is he like when I get there? Because plenty of us have been yoked to demanding people before. We have been near people whose approval was conditional and whose mood was a weather system we had to monitor. If God is like that, then coming close is not rest. It is a new and more exhausting vigilance. So he tells you in advance, I am meek and lowly in heart. The one you are being yoked to is not going to set a pace that kills you. He's not going to be disappointed in you at a level you cannot detect until it is too late. He is not going to require you to manage his feelings about you. That is the character of the one at the other end of the beam. And the result, ye shall find rest unto your souls. Notice what has changed from the previous verse. In verse 28 he said, I will give you rest, a gift received at the moment of coming. Here he says, ye shall find rest. You're set, you will discover it over time in the walking. Both are true and they are not in tension. There is a rest that is given the moment you come, the way a load comes off a back all at once. And there is a rest that is found gradually over years as you walk yoked to him and discover in 1,000 ordinary situations that he is exactly what he said he was. The first is instantaneous. The second is the work of a lifetime. Do not despise the second because you wanted only the first. And rest unto your souls, suches human, not rest for your body, though your body will benefit. Rest for the suche, the self, the seat of your desires and fears and identity. That deep interior room where you actually live, the one nobody else has ever been in, the one that is tired in a way that sleep does not reach. That is the room he is offering to enter. Verse 3. My yoke is easy. Matthew 11:30. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. He finishes the invitation with a claim so audacious that it is worth pausing simply to notice how strange it is. Every religious system in the history of the world has been, in practice, a system of weight, requirements, obligations, standards, rituals, performances, ledgers of merit and failure. In the specific world Jesus was speaking into, the burden was measurable and enormous, an elaborated structure of oral tradition built around the law of Moses, mediated by professionals, so detailed that ordinary working people could not possibly keep up with it, and knew they could not. Later in Matthew, Jesus will say of the religious authorities of his day that they bind heavy burdens, grievous to be borne, and lay them on other men's shoulders, but will not themselves move them with one of their fingers. That is what religion had come to mean for the average person listening to him. Another person's load, strapped to your back by someone who is not carrying it himself. And into that he says, my yoke is easy. The word is Christos, and it is one of the most beautiful mistranslations in English Bible history, not because it is wrong exactly, but because easy in modern English suggests something undemanding, and that is not what the word means. Christos means well-fitted, serviceable, kind. It is used of wine that has mellowed with age and no longer bites. It is used in Luke's gospel of God's kindness toward the unthankful and evil. It's a word about goodness of fit and gentleness of character, not about the absence of effort. So he is not saying, following me will not ask anything of you. That would be false. And he says elsewhere plainly that it will cost you everything. He is saying, what I ask of you will fit you. It will not rub. It will not open wounds on your neck. It will not require you to become someone other than the person I made, in order to be acceptable to the one who made you. Sit with that for a moment, especially if your experience of faith has been the opposite. There are many people watching this whose primary experience of God has been the experience of not measuring up, of a low, constant hum of disapproval running underneath their religious life, of prayers offered in the suspicion that they were being graded, of church attendance that felt like reporting for inspection. If that is you, hear it. That yoke was not his. It did not come from the carpenter. Somebody else made it and told you it was from God, and it never fit because it was never measured to you. And my burden is light. Elephron. The word is used of things that are portable, manageable, able to be carried without being crushed. Not weightless, portable. Here is what makes this not a contradiction. The load Jesus gives you is not smaller than the load you were carrying. In some measurable senses, it is larger, because he will send you toward people and situations you would have avoided, and ask you to forgive things you would rather nurse, and call you to a kind of love that costs. But he never gives you a load without also giving you himself at the other end of the beam. And he never asks you to carry the thing that was crushing you, which was never the work. It was the verdict. It was the question of whether you are enough. It was the ledger. It was the terrible, grinding, invisible labor of trying to secure your own standing before God and other people and yourself. That is the burden he takes off permanently, and it is the heaviest one you have ever carried, and most people do not even know it is on them until it comes off. So the invitation is complete, and it comes in 3 movements that we have now walked through slowly. Come, because you are tired, and that is the only qualification. Take my yoke, because you were never meant to pull alone, and the equipment I made actually fits. And know what I am like: meek, lowly in heart, kind, well-fitted, portable. Everything else in these 4 hours is commentary on this, and if you receive nothing else in the whole study, receive this. The one calling you is not standing at a distance with a list. He is holding out a shaped piece of wood that he measured to your shoulders, and he is already standing in the place where the other half of it goes. Verse 4, Come ye yourselves apart. Mark 6:31. And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place, and rest a while, for there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. There is a verse in Mark's Gospel that almost nobody preaches, and it may be the most practically necessary sentence in the New Testament for the particular century you are living in. Set the scene, because the scene is what makes it land. The disciples have just come back from their first solo mission. Jesus had sent them out 2 by 2 with almost nothing, no bread, no bag, no money, and they had gone into villages, preached, cast out demons, anointed the sick, and seen things happen. They come back full of it, talking over each other, reporting everything they had done and taught. And at the same moment, news arrives that John the Baptist has been executed by Herod. His head brought into a banquet on a platter as entertainment for a drunk king and his guests. The disciples have just come off a spiritual high and directly into the news that the greatest prophet of their generation, the man who baptized their teacher, has been murdered by the state as a party trick. And the crowds are pressing in. Mark says there were so many coming and going that they had no leisure so much as to eat, not too busy for luxury, too busy for food. Now hear what Jesus says. He does not say, there is a great harvest, push through. He does not say, John's death makes the mission more urgent, work harder. He does not deliver a sermon about how tiredness is a small price for the kingdom. He says, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. 4 things in that sentence deserve attention, and I want to take them one at a time, because I think this verse rebukes something in almost every one of us. First, come ye yourselves, dot humes autoi. There is an emphasis in the Greek that the English cannot quite carry. You, yourselves, personally. Jesus is speaking to the same men whose lives are now organized entirely around the needs of other people, and he uses a construction that forces them to hear that they are being addressed as people with bodies and limits, and not as instruments of a mission. There is a kind of person who can hear an instruction on behalf of someone else all day long and cannot hear it about themselves. Jesus blocks that exit. You, yourselves. Second, apart, away from the crowd, not away from love, not away from responsibility permanently, but away, physically, deliberately, temporarily removed from the demand. There is a mythology, and it is stronger in religious circles than almost anywhere else, that separation from people is a kind of failure of love. Jesus did not think so. The Gospels record him withdrawing repeatedly, sometimes while people were still looking for him, sometimes when the need was still visibly unmet. Luke says it plainly. He withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed, not once, as a pattern. Third, into a desert place, eremos topos, a deserted place, an empty place, a place with nothing in it. Notice that he does not send them somewhere restorative in the way we would design it. He sends them somewhere empty, because the thing that restores is not stimulation of a nicer kind. It is the absence of demand. Our version of rest is very often just a different input, a screen instead of a task, noise of a more entertaining variety. You can finish a whole evening of it and get up more tired than you sat down, and you know this because you have done it many times, and so have I. Jesus prescribes emptiness, a place where nothing is being asked of you. Fourth, and rest a while, not permanently, a while. This is not an invitation to abandon the work. It is the recognition that the work is sustained by rhythm, and that a person who never comes apart will eventually come apart in the other sense of the phrase. And here is the detail that makes me love this passage more than almost any other. Read the rest of the chapter. They get into the boat. They set off for the quiet place. And the crowd see them going and run around the lake on foot and are waiting on the shore when the boat lands, 5,000 of them. The rest gets interrupted. The plan fails. And Jesus, seeing them, is moved with compassion, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd, and he begins to teach them, and eventually feeds all 5,000 out of 5 loaves and 2 fish. So the day that began as a retreat became one of the most demanding days recorded in the Gospels. But look at what he does after. Mark 6:45 and 46. He constrains his disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side, sends the crowd away, and departs into a mountain to pray. He does not abandon the principle because the day disrupted it. He rescheduled it. The retreat that was interrupted in the afternoon happened that night, alone, on a mountainside, while everyone else slept. That is the model, and it is a mercy for anyone whose life makes the tidy version impossible. If you are caring for a parent with dementia, or raising small children, or working nights, or living in a situation where you genuinely cannot go apart for 3 days to a cabin, hear this. Jesus' own rest was interrupted repeatedly by legitimate need. He did not respond by deciding rest was for other people. He responded by taking it later, taking it at night, taking it in fragments, taking it on the far side of a lake at an inconvenient hour, but taking it. Come ye yourselves apart, and rest a while. It is not a suggestion for the spiritually advanced. It is what the Son of God told exhausted, grieving, overworked people to do on the worst week of their lives. Verse 5, the Sabbath was made for man, Mark 2:27, and he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Now we go one layer deeper, from the practice of rest to the architecture of it, because Jesus makes a claim here about the way reality is built. The setting is a confrontation. Jesus and his disciples are walking through grain fields on a Sabbath, and the disciples who are hungry begin plucking heads of grain and eating them. This was not theft. The law of Moses explicitly permitted a traveler to pick by hand from a neighbor's field. The objection was not that they took grain. The objection was the day. Plucking grain was reckoned by the religious authorities as a form of harvesting, and harvesting was work, and work on the Sabbath was forbidden. So the Pharisees confront him, and after pointing them to the account of David eating the consecrated bread when he and his men were hungry, Jesus makes this statement, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Take the word made, egeneto, it came into being, it was brought about. Jesus is reaching back past the entire apparatus of religious regulation to the origin of the thing. In Genesis, before there was a nation of Israel, before there was a law, before there was a temple or a priesthood or a single religious authority to enforce anything, God rested on the 7th day and set it apart. Rest is not a religious obligation that was later imposed on human beings. Rest was woven into the structure of the world before human beings had done anything at all, which means, and this is the part that should genuinely change something in how you think about your own tiredness, your need for rest is not a design flaw. It is not evidence of weakness, insufficient discipline, or a lack of commitment. It is not the thing standing between you and the life you would have if you were more capable. It is the way you were built on purpose by someone who was not embarrassed to model it himself in the first week of creation. Made for man, dia ton anthropon, on account of, for the sake of, for the benefit of humanity. It is a gift given to a creature, not a tax levied on one. And notice the astonishing social implication in the original setting, which we tend to miss because we have never lived under an ancient economy. In the surrounding cultures of the ancient Near East, there was no such thing as a mandated day when everyone stopped. Rest was for the powerful. The wealthy could stop. The slave, the laborer, the ox, the foreign worker could not. The Sabbath command in Exodus explicitly extends the rest downward to your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your cattle, and the stranger inside your gates. It was, among other things, the most radical labor legislation in the ancient world, a weekly, non-negotiable declaration that a human being is not a unit of production and that the value of a person is not established by their output. And that is exactly the lie that is grinding down the person watching this, not the theological version of it. Most of you would deny the theological version if you were asked directly. The functional version, the one that operates below the level of belief and governs how you actually feel on a Tuesday when you did not get enough done. The one that makes rest feel like something you have to earn by first exhausting yourself, so that the nap is permitted only after collapse and never before it. The one that makes it almost physically difficult to sit still without a screen in your hand, because stillness feels like waste, and waste feels like sin. Jesus, standing in a grain field with hungry men, dismantles it in one sentence. The rest was made for you. You were not made to feed the machine. And then in the very next verse, he adds something that should not be skipped. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath, which is the largest claim in the paragraph. He is not merely offering a more humane interpretation of an old rule. He is claiming ownership of the institution of rest itself. The Sabbath belongs to him, which means that when he says, "Come unto me and I will give you rest," he is not offering a substitute for what Genesis established. He is announcing that he is what it was pointing at the whole time. Verse 6, Martha, Martha, Luke 10:41-42. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful. And Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. There is no scene in the Gospels that more people quietly resent than this one, and I want to handle it carefully, because it is usually preached in a way that is unfair to a woman who was doing something genuinely kind. Here is the situation. Jesus is traveling, and Martha opens her home to him. That is not a small act. Hospitality in that world was a serious undertaking. No refrigeration, no shops, a guest arriving with a group of followers, and a host responsible for producing an honorable meal from whatever the household had. Martha is not fussing over table decorations. She is doing hard, hot, necessary work, and she is doing it for Jesus. Let us be clear about that before anything else. Her service was real service, offered in love, and the meal that was eventually eaten in that house was eaten because Martha cooked it. Her sister Mary, meanwhile, sits at Jesus' feet and listens. The phrase "sat at his feet" is a technical one. It is the posture of a disciple with a rabbi. It is what Paul says of himself, that he was brought up at the feet of Gamaliel. Mary has taken the seat of a student, which in that culture, for a woman, was itself a quiet act of enormous boldness. And Jesus does not object for a second. And Martha, understandably, gets angry. And what she says is revealing. Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me. Notice that she does not go to Mary. She goes to Jesus and she does two things. She questions his care and she tells him what to do about it. And he answers her by saying her name twice. Martha, Martha. Do not rush past that. When a name is doubled in Scripture, it is almost always tenderness at a moment of intensity. Abraham, Abraham, when the knife was raised. Simon, Simon, Satan hath desired to have you. Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is not the tone of a superior correcting an employee. It is the tone of someone kneeling down to meet a person's eyes. Then, thou art careful and troubled about many things. Two words again, merimnus. You are anxious, divided, your mind pulled in multiple directions at once. and turbaze. You are agitated, stirred up in a state of internal commotion. The first is interior, the second shows on the outside. He is describing with clinical precision the exact state of a person who is doing many good things while being torn apart inside by all of them. And here is the diagnosis that most sermons on this passage get backwards. He does not say, "You are doing the wrong thing." He does not tell her that cooking is unspiritual, or that hospitality does not matter, or that she should have left the guests hungry. He says, about many things, the problem is not that she is serving. The problem is that she has fragmented. She's in the kitchen, but her attention is in the other room monitoring her sister, and her heart is in a courtroom prosecuting a case about fairness, and somewhere underneath all of it, she's wondering whether anyone notices what she does around here. That is not a labor problem, that is a soul problem, and adding Mary to the kitchen would not have fixed it. But one thing is needful. Henos de esten crea. One thing is necessary. He does not spell out what the one thing is, but the scene has already shown us. It is what Mary is doing, being with him, receiving from him before working for him. And notice that Mary's posture is the posture of the person who has nothing to offer. She is not producing anything, she is receiving, which brings us right back to Matthew 11. Come, not come and be useful. Come. And then the last phrase, which is a promise more than a rebuke, which shall not be taken away from her. Everything Martha was making that afternoon was going to be gone by nightfall. That is not a criticism of the meal. It is simply the nature of meals. Almost everything we spend our days producing has that quality. The clean kitchen gets dirty. The finished project gets superseded. The email answered generates 3 more. If your rest depends on reaching a point where the work is finally done, you will never rest, because the work is not the kind of thing that finishes. But what Mary received that day could not be taken from her. She heard him. She was with him. And 40 years later, when Mary was an old woman in a world that had crucified and then resurrected the man sitting in her sister's living room, she still had every word. So if you are the Martha in this story, and a great many of the most faithful, most exhausted people watching this are, hear the tenderness in it. He is not asking you to stop serving. He is asking you to stop serving from empty while keeping score, while wondering whether he notices. Sit down first. The meal will still get made. A pause in the first hour. The 2 words Jesus never said to a tired person. Before we close the first hour, I want to do something that I have found more persuasive than any argument, which is simply to look at the record. We have been claiming for an hour that the one issuing this invitation is meek and lowly in heart, that he is safe to come close to when you have nothing left. That is easy to assert. So let us test it against how he actually behaved when exhausted, failing, depleted people were standing in front of him. Because there are 2 words that appear in almost every human system of expectation, religious and otherwise. And I want you to notice that they never once come out of his mouth toward a tired person. The first is harder. The second is enough. Start in the garden. Gethsemane, the night of the arrest, the most consequential hours in human history. Jesus asks 3 of his closest friends to stay awake and watch with him while he prays. And it is worth pausing on the fact that he asked at all, because it tells you he wanted company, which is a very human thing to want. He goes off to pray, he comes back, and they are asleep. Now this is not a small failure. He is in agony. He has said, "My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death." He asked for one thing on the worst night of his life from the 3 men closest to him, and they could not stay awake for an hour. And what does he say? What he says to Peter is, "Could ye not watch with me 1 hour?" Which is honest, and it registers the disappointment, and I'm not going to pretend it does not. But then comes the next sentence, and it is one of the most tender things in the New Testament. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He makes an excuse for them. On the night he is betrayed, while his friends sleep through his agony, the Son of God supplies the mitigating factor himself. He notices that they wanted to. He notices that their bodies gave out. Luke adds a detail that is almost unbearable. He found them sleeping for sorrow. Grief had exhausted them. They were not indifferent. They were undone. And when it happens a third time, he does not deliver a rebuke. He says, "Sleep on now and take your rest." There is no further correction. He lets them sleep and then wakes them when it is time to go and walks out to meet the torches. That is what he does with people who fail him because they are tired. Now go to a well in Samaria at the 6th hour, which is noon. A woman comes to draw water at the hottest part of the day, which no one did if they had a choice, because the sensible time was early morning when the other women came. She comes at noon, alone, which tells you everything about her social position before a word is spoken. Jesus, who is himself tired from the journey, John says so plainly, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, asks her for a drink. He begins by needing something from her, and then he has the longest recorded theological conversation in any of the Gospels with a Samaritan woman with 5 failed marriages in the heat of the day, and he does not open with her behavior and does not close with a lecture. He tells her about living water, and he tells her who he is in plainer terms than he used with almost anyone else. Not, "Try harder," not, "You should be ashamed." He was thirsty, and he asked her for a favor, and then he gave her the thing she had been looking for in 5 marriages. Now go to the pool at Bethesda. A man has been ill for 38 years. 38. He is lying beside a pool that people believed had healing properties when the water stirred, and his complaint, when Jesus asks whether he wants to be made whole, is essentially a description of decades of losing. "I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. This is a man who has been beaten to the water by faster people for 38 years. There is not one word in the text about his faith. He does not ask. He does not even seem to know who Jesus is. A few verses later, when questioned, he cannot identify him. And Jesus heals him anyway, on the strength of nothing at all. Now go to the crowd of parents bringing children. The disciples rebuke them. This is not a good use of the teacher's time. He has important work. Take the children away. And Jesus is displeased, and the word Mark uses is strong. Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not. And then he takes them up in his arms and blesses them, which is not an efficient use of an afternoon, and does not accomplish anything strategic, and is exactly what he chose to do with the time. Now go to Peter 3 days after the denial, on a beach at dawn. If there was ever a moment where a rebuke was warranted, this is it. Peter had promised, loudly in front of everyone, that he would die before he denied him, and then denied him 3 times to a servant girl and a group of men warming their hands at a fire. And Jesus builds a fire on the beach and cooks him breakfast. That is what he does first. He feeds him. And only then, after the food, does he ask the 3 gentle questions that mirror the 3 denials, and give him back his commission and tell him to feed the sheep. The restoration is done over a meal quietly, in the early morning, without a single mention of what a disappointment he had been. Do you see the pattern? Every time, without exception, when a person is depleted, failing, ashamed, or too tired to perform, the response is provision before correction. Food, healing, water, sleep, blessing, breakfast. The correction, when it comes at all, comes afterward and comes gently, and comes from a position of already restored relationship. So when he says, "Take my yoke upon you, for I am meek and lowly in heart," this is not a claim we have to take on trust. It is a claim with a documented record behind it, and the record is consistent across every gospel and every kind of person. And here is why I wanted to spend this time on it before we close the first hour. Many of you have been living for years under a voice that says harder and never says enough. Some of you got it from a parent, and it has been running in your head in their exact tone since you were 9. Some of you got it from a church that preached grace on Sunday and functioned on performance the rest of the week. Some of you built it yourself out of the reasonable observation that things fall apart when you stop pushing. Whatever its source, I want to be as clear as I know how to be. That voice is not his. He has never once said harder to an exhausted person. He has never once said you should be further along by now. When his friends fell asleep during his agony, he explained their weakness sympathetically and let them rest. That is who is waiting at the other end of the invitation. So when you come, and I hope you will tonight, in whatever condition you are actually in, do not brace for impact. There is no impact coming. There is bread on a fire on a beach and a man who already knows what you did, cooking it. Verse 7, Peace I leave with you. John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. We close the first hour with the sentence Jesus said on the last night of his life, and the timing is the entire point. This is the upper room. Judas has already gone out into the night. Jesus has washed their feet, told them one of them will betray him, told Peter he will deny him 3 times before morning, and told all of them that he is going somewhere they cannot follow. Every source of stability these men have is being removed in a single evening. In a matter of hours, the one they left everything for will be arrested, tried, tortured, and executed publicly by an empire that does this sort of thing routinely and well. And in that room, on that night, with all of that already visible on the horizon, he says, Peace I leave with you. Peace is Irene, and behind it, as we said at the beginning, stands shalom, wholeness, all the pieces present and in right relation. But notice the verb, I leave with you, aphemi. It is the language of a legacy, of something deposited, willed, handed over deliberately by someone who knows he is going. This is a dying man distributing his estate. And what he leaves them is not money or land or a system. He leaves them his peace. Then, my peace I give unto you, ten ironen, ten amen, emphatically the peace that belongs to me. Not a peace of the general kind, mine. The specific peace with which I am facing this specific night. Stop and think about what that means, because it is one of the most staggering claims in the Gospels. Whatever quality of interior stillness allowed Jesus to sleep in the stern of a boat during a storm violent enough to frighten professional fishermen, whatever allowed him to stand in front of Pilate and say almost nothing, whatever allowed him, in a few hours, to walk into Gethsemane and pray until the sweat fell from him like drops of blood, and then get up and go out to meet the men with torches instead of running. That is the substance he is handing over. He is not offering the exhausted, a diluted version of his own composure. He is offering the thing itself, and then he distinguishes it from every counterfeit. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. The peace the world gives has 3 characteristics, and you know all 3 from experience. First, it is circumstantial. It depends on things going well, and it evaporates the moment the conditions change, which means it is always accompanied by a low anxiety about whether the conditions will hold. Second, it is conditional. The world's giving usually has terms attached, and you find them later. Third, it is thin. It is the absence of disturbance rather than the presence of anything. Turn off the noise, remove the conflict, distract yourself successfully, and you get quiet, and quiet is not the same thing as peace. A cemetery is quiet. His peace is different in kind, not merely in degree. It is not the absence of storm. He gave it in a room where the storm was already inside the building, and then the 2 commands, and it is worth noticing that they are commands. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. me tarasesto. The word tarasso is used of water being stirred up, agitated, churned into cloudiness so that you cannot see through it. That is exactly what fear does to the interior life. It does not merely hurt, it obscures. A troubled heart cannot see clearly. Every decision made from that state is made through cloudy water. But how do you obey a command not to be troubled? You cannot simply decide to stop feeling. And that is the point of the order of the sentence. The command comes second. Peace is given first, and then on the basis of what has been given, the command is issued. Do not let your heart be churned. He is not asking them to manufacture calm out of nothing. He is telling them that something has been placed in their possession and that they now have a say in whether they live from it. Which means peace, in the Christian sense, is not primarily a feeling that happens to you. It is a gift you can either take up or leave sitting there. Every day of your life, including today, including tonight, there is a decision available to you about which reality you will let govern the interior room, the churning water, or the deposit that was left to you by someone who knew exactly what was coming and gave it anyway. That is the end of the first hour. The invitation has been issued. He has called you, told you what he's like, given you the day off from proving yourself, sat you down at his feet, and left you his own peace in his will. Now, in the second hour, we go into the room where the anxiety actually lives, and we take it apart, piece by piece. Hour 2, the quieting, the words that take the anxious mind apart. Verse 8, take no thought for your life. Matthew 6:25. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment? We now enter the longest sustained teaching on anxiety that any religious figure in history has ever given, and we are going to walk through it slowly, one movement at a time, because it is constructed like an argument, and it only works if you follow the steps. First, the translation, because take no thought has confused English readers for 400 years. In 1611, when the King James translators chose that phrase, thought carried the sense of anxious care. Shakespeare uses it that way, of a man dying of thought, meaning consumed by worry. It never meant do not plan. Jesus is not condemning forethought. The same Jesus told a parable about a man who failed to count the cost before building a tower and became a laughingstock. He's not against budgeting, saving, or preparing. The word is merimnao, and its structure is the whole teaching in miniature. It comes from a root, meaning to divide, to split, to pull into parts. To merimnao is to have a mind pulled apart, to be present in one place physically while being dismembered across a dozen imagined futures. It is the state of the person who is sitting at their own dinner table while mentally rehearsing a conversation that has not happened, running the numbers on a bill that is not due, and pre-experiencing a diagnosis that has not been given. That is the precise thing Jesus is addressing, not planning, fragmentation. The interior scattering of a person across possible futures until there is nobody left at home in the present. And notice where he starts, with the basics: food, drink, clothing. He does not begin with the exotic anxieties. He begins with survival, because he is speaking to peasant farmers and day laborers in an agrarian economy with no safety net, no insurance, no stored surplus, where a bad harvest meant real hunger and a serious illness meant destitution. This is important because it means we cannot dismiss this teaching as the advice of someone who never had anything to worry about, delivered to people whose needs were met. He is saying, take no anxious thought to people who had genuine, immediate physical reasons for fear, that either makes it insulting or makes it enormous. It is not insulting. Then, the question that carries the logic, is not the life more than meat and the body than raiment? He is making an argument from the greater to the lesser, and it goes like this. God gave you the greater thing, the life itself, the body itself. Neither of those was arranged by you. You did not consult on the color of your eyes, the century of your birth, the beating of your heart in your chest during the years before you were old enough to know you had one. The greater gift, the one you could never have secured for yourself, has already been given. So the anxiety is, structurally, an odd one. It presumes that the God who gave the enormous gift will now become negligent about the smaller ones, that he could manage existence but might drop the details. And here is where the teaching starts to become genuinely useful rather than merely comforting. Jesus is not saying your fears are irrational in their content. Sometimes the feared thing does happen. He is saying that the anxiety is theologically incoherent, that it is running on an assumption about God's character that you would deny if it were spoken out loud. Underneath most chronic worry is a picture of God as either unwilling or unable. And the whole of the next 9 verses is Jesus dismantling that picture with evidence you can see out of a window. One more thing before we move on, and it is pastoral. And I want to say it plainly because there will be people watching who need it said. Jesus is describing a spiritual condition, not diagnosing a medical one. There are people whose anxiety has a biological dimension, whose bodies are producing alarm signals that have nothing to do with their trust in God, and who have prayed with real faith and still wake at 4 in the morning with a racing heart. If that is you, hear this clearly. This passage is not a rebuke aimed at you, and needing a doctor is not a failure of faith any more than needing glasses is. Jesus healed bodies constantly and never once treated a physical condition as a moral verdict. Take what is here as nourishment, not as an accusation. And if the weight you are carrying has become dangerous, if you have found yourself thinking that the people in your life would be better off without you, please tell a real person today, someone you trust or a doctor or a crisis line in your country. That is not weakness and it is not faithlessness. Staying is part of trusting. Verse 9, behold the fowls of the air. Matthew 6:26. Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns. Yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? Now the argument becomes visual, and I want you to notice the teaching method before we look at the content. Jesus does not answer anxiety with a doctrine. He does not say, let me explain to you the doctrine of providence, and here are 4 supporting propositions. He says, look at the birds. He points out of the window. He tells a crowd of worried people to lift their heads and observe something ordinary. The word is emblepsate, not a glance but a fixed, deliberate looking into. Look hard at them, study them, which tells you something about how anxiety is actually broken, and it is not what most of us assume. Anxiety is a failure of attention as much as a failure of belief. The anxious mind is not looking at anything. It is looking at a mental construction of a future that does not yet exist, which is precisely why arguing with it rarely works. Jesus does not argue. He redirects the eyes to something real and present and observable and says, what do you see? So look. They sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns. 3 stages of agricultural security: planting, harvesting, storing, and the birds do none of them. No planning horizon, no reserve, no barn. Now, do not misread this as an endorsement of passivity. Birds are not idle. Anyone who has watched a bird in the hour after dawn knows that it works constantly, from first light, foraging with enormous energy. The point is not that the bird does not work. The point is that the bird does not have a mechanism for guaranteeing the future. It has no stored security, no way of ensuring that food exists tomorrow, and it does not appear to be tormented by that fact. It works, and it is fed, and it does not have a barn. Yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. And notice that Jesus does not say nature feeds them or the ecosystem provides. He says your heavenly Father. The same God who is the father of the anxious human beings listening is described as personally, presently involved in the feeding of ordinary birds. There is a psalm behind this. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. And a whole Hebrew tradition of a God whose attention extends to creatures no human being is counting. And then the question that lands the argument, are you not much better than they? Malon diaphoret. You differ more, you are of more consequence. This is not a statement that birds are worthless. The whole force of the argument depends on God genuinely caring about them. It is an argument from lesser to greater, and it is asking the listener to do the arithmetic themselves. If the Father is personally attentive to the feeding of a creature that will not be remembered by anyone, and you are made in his image, and you are the one for whom he will shortly go to a cross, then what exactly are you afraid of? Here is where I want to press this into your actual life, because it is easy to hear this as poetry and let it float away. Anxiety is, at bottom, the labor of trying to be your own providence. It is the exhausting internal work of scanning the horizon for every possible threat, pre-solving every scenario, and holding the whole future in your head at once so that nothing can catch you unprepared. And the reason it is so tiring is that you are attempting a job that is not yours, with faculties that were never designed for it, at a scale no human mind can hold. You are trying to be God for your own life, and you are doing it badly, because nobody could do it well. Jesus points at a sparrow. That creature does not hold the future in its head. It is fed anyway. I know what rises up in response because it rises in me. Yes, but birds die. Some winters are hard, and some nests fail, and some sparrows do not make it to spring. Jesus knows that. In the 10th chapter of the same gospel, he will say directly that sparrows fall to the ground, and that not one of them does so apart from the Father. He is not promising that nothing will ever go wrong. He is telling you who is present when it does. That is a smaller promise than the one anxiety demands, and a far larger one than anxiety can imagine. Verse 10, consider the lilies of the field, Matthew 6:28-29. And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. He moves from food to clothing, from birds to flowers, and from the anxiety of survival to something subtler, and for many people watching, closer to the bone. Because clothing anxiety is not only about having something to wear, it never has been. Clothing is presentation. It is how you are seen, how you are read, how you are placed by other people within a hierarchy in the first 4 seconds of contact. When Jesus turns to raiment, he is turning to the fear of being judged, of being found insufficient, of being visible and coming up short. And that fear is doing more damage to more people watching this than fear of hunger, because most of you are not hungry, and almost all of you are tired of being evaluated. Consider the lilies, katamathete. And this is a stronger word than the one used for the birds. It means to learn something thoroughly, to study it, to examine it until you understand how it works. Learn from the flowers, how they grow, not how they strive, how they grow. Growth is a passive process from the standpoint of the thing growing. A wildflower on a Galilean hillside does not decide to grow, does not manage its own development, does not lie awake at night worried about whether it is developing on schedule compared to the other flowers. It receives sun, rain, and soil, and something happens in it that it is not producing. They toil not, neither do they spin. 2 words that between them describe the whole textile economy of the ancient world. Toil, kopiao, the same word from Matthew 11, labor to exhaustion, and in this context, the heavy outdoor work associated with men. Spin, netho, the endless indoor work of turning fiber into thread, which in that society was the work of women, and which never finished. Between the two words, Jesus has named every category of the listener's labor and said, "The flower does none of this, and look at it." And yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Solomon is the deliberate comparison, and it is devastating in a quiet way. Solomon was the wealthiest king in Israel's memory, the reference point for splendor, a man whose court was so magnificent that a visiting queen ran out of breath when she saw it. Every thread on him represented human labor at the highest possible level. The finest dyes, the rarest fabrics, the most skilled artisans in the ancient world. And Jesus says, a weed growing wild in a field which nobody planted and nobody tends is dressed better than that, because there is a category difference between the glory that is manufactured and the glory that is given. All of Solomon's magnificence was applied from the outside. The flower's beauty comes from the inside, from the life that is in it, from being what it was made to be without any effort at all. And then the sentence that follows, which we should not skip. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Look at what he says about the flower's lifespan. Today it is, and tomorrow it is fuel. In a treeless region, dried grasses and wildflowers were gathered and burned in clay ovens to bake bread. The flower that outshines Solomon has a life measured in days and ends as kindling, and God dressed it like that anyway, which tells you something enormous about the character of God that has nothing to do with efficiency. He is extravagant with beauty in places where nobody is watching and nothing is being gained. Wildflowers bloom in valleys no human being will ever walk through. The deep ocean is full of creatures patterned in colors that will never be seen by an eye. God is not a minimalist. He does not allocate beauty on the basis of return. Now put that against the anxiety of being seen and evaluated. If God clothes a flower that lasts a day with a splendor that exceeds the wealthiest man in history, in a field where nobody is looking, what do you think he intends for a creature he made in his own image and called his child? You are not required to generate your own worth. You have been trying to, and it is one of the heaviest of the burdens we spoke about in the first hour, and it is not yours to carry. O ye of little faith, oligopistoi, and even the rebuke is gentle, because notice what it says, little faith, not no faith. He is not questioning whether they belong to him. He is saying, you have some, and it is smaller than it needs to be for the situation you are in, and it can grow. He calls his own disciples this several times, always in the middle of teaching them, never in the middle of dismissing them. Verse 11, take no thought for the morrow. Matthew 6:34. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. If Matthew 6 were a piece of music, this is where it resolves. The final line of the long teaching on worry, and it is the most practical sentence in the whole passage. Take no thought for the morrow. And notice immediately what is not said. He does not say that tomorrow will be fine. He does not say that nothing bad is coming. In fact, the last clause of the verse says the opposite. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Each day has trouble in it. He assumes it. This is not optimism. Optimism would be a prediction about outcomes, and he makes no such prediction. What he does is give you a boundary. The morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Tomorrow will worry about itself. There is almost a wry humor in the personification, as though tomorrow were perfectly capable of managing its own concerns without your assistance today. Your assignment is not tomorrow. Your assignment is the day you are standing in. And here is the mechanism that makes this more than a nice sentiment. And I want you to see it clearly, because it explains why worry is so uniquely exhausting. Grace, in the biblical picture, is given for what actually arrives, not for what might arrive. The strength you are given comes with the situation, at the moment of the situation, which means that when you drag tomorrow's imagined trouble into today, you're attempting to face it without the grace that would come with it, because that grace has not been issued, because the trouble is not here. You are rehearsing a battle without the armor that would be provided on the actual day. Of course, it is unbearable. You are feeling the full weight of a scenario, stripped of the help that would accompany it if it ever became real. Think about the times you have actually gone through something hard. Almost everyone reports the same strange thing afterward. The anticipation was worse than the event, not because the event was easy, but because in the event there was something present, a steadiness, a clarity, an unexpected capacity to do the next thing that was completely absent during the months of dreading it. That is what this verse is describing. Grace arrives with the day, and there is a manner pattern underneath all of this, which every Jewish listener would have heard immediately. In the wilderness, God fed Israel with bread that appeared each morning, and they were told to gather what they needed for that day only. Those who tried to store it up overnight found it full of worms and spoiled by morning. The provision was real, generous, daily, and non-storable. God was training a nation of former slaves out of a scarcity reflex and into a relationship of daily dependence, and the training method was to make hoarding impossible. Your soul does not come with a barn either. You cannot stockpile grace for a future you have imagined. You can only receive it today for today, and then again tomorrow for tomorrow. So here is a practical thing to do with this verse tonight, and I would ask you to actually do it rather than just hear it. Take whatever you are carrying, the thing you wrote in one word in the comments if you did that, and ask one question about it. Is this today's or is this tomorrow's? Be honest. A great deal of what is sitting on your chest right now is not happening today. It is a projection, a scenario, a conversation you are pre-having, an outcome you are pre-grieving, and your Father has not given you the grace for it because it is not here and it may never be. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Today has enough in it. Today also has enough grace in it. Those two sufficiencies are matched deliberately by a God who portions out help the way he portioned out bread in the desert, daily, adequately, and never in a quantity you can hoard. A pause in the second hour, the three lies underneath, every anxiety. Before we go on to the next saying, I want to stop and do something slightly different, because we are halfway through the teaching on worry, and it will be more useful to you if we name what is actually happening underneath it. Anxiety always feels like it is about a subject, money, health, a child, a decision. But if you sit with 100 anxious people and listen carefully, and I have, you find that the subjects vary enormously, and the structure underneath is almost identical. There are three convictions doing the work, and they are almost never spoken out loud, because the moment they are spoken out loud, most believers would deny them. They operate below the level of stated belief, in the place where your actual reactions live, and that is precisely why arguing with the surface content of a worry never accomplishes anything. Jesus addresses all three in Matthew 6, which is why the passage works. And I want to name them plainly. The first lie is, it depends on me. This is the most respectable of the three, and in some circles it is treated as a virtue. It is the conviction that if you stop holding everything up, everything will come down. That your vigilance is load-bearing. That the reason things have not fallen apart yet is that you have been scanning the horizon without a break for 11 years. You will recognize it by a particular symptom, the inability to fully relax even when nothing is wrong. If the quiet moments make you uneasy rather than glad, If a peaceful afternoon produces a low, nagging sense that you are forgetting something, that is this lie operating. The mind that believes everything depends on it cannot accept a moment off duty, because a moment off duty feels like negligence. And Jesus takes this apart with the birds. They sow not, neither do they reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. He is pointing at creatures that have no capacity whatsoever to secure their own future, and noting that they are nonetheless alive, which means the universe is not, in fact, held up by the vigilance of the creatures inside it. Here is a question worth sitting with tonight. What exactly do you believe you are preventing by worrying? Ask it seriously and try to answer it in a specific sentence. Almost nobody can. The honest answer, when people finally arrive at it, is usually something like, "I do not know, but it feels irresponsible to stop." That feeling is the lie, and it is worth knowing it by name. The second lie is, "I have to know." This one is subtler and, I suspect, is the actual engine of most sleepless nights. It is the conviction that certainty is a prerequisite for peace. That once you know how the situation resolves, you will be able to rest, and that until then, resting would be premature. And so the mind does what minds do. It manufactures certainty artificially by running scenarios. If it cannot have real information about the future, it will simulate the future instead, over and over, in enormous detail, at high emotional cost, in the hope that having pre-lived every branch will provide something that resembles knowing. Notice what this does. It converts one difficult future, the real one which will contain grace when it arrives, into 50 imagined futures, each of which you experience emotionally without any grace at all, because they are not real and grace is not issued to fictions. That is why the person who worried for 8 months about a scan is more exhausted than the person who received the actual bad news. Not because the news is easy, but because the second person went through one thing and the first went through 50. Jesus addresses this one with the boundary. Take therefore no thought for the morrow. He does not offer information about tomorrow. He does not tell them how it will go. He gives them a fence and says, "This is your territory today, and the other side of the fence is not yours to walk in," which means Christian rest is not the rest of a person who knows what is coming. It is the rest of a person who knows who is coming with them. Those are radically different, and only one of them is actually available. The third lie is, "I am on my own." This is the deepest of the three, and it is the one that makes the other two feel reasonable. Because if it were true that nobody is watching, that no one is coming, that the outcome depends entirely on my own competence and resources, then hypervigilance would not be a spiritual problem. It would be the only rational strategy available, and this one usually does not come from theology. It comes from history. It comes from the time you needed someone and no one came. It comes from a parent whose attention had to be earned, or a season when you told people what was happening to you and they did not believe you, or a period when you prayed with everything in you and the thing you were praying about happened anyway. That kind of experience installs a conviction in the body underneath the mind that says, nobody is coming, so hold on tightly. Jesus does not address this one with an argument. He addresses it with a word, and he uses it relentlessly in this passage. Father, your heavenly Father feedeth them. Your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. Your Father's good pleasure. Not one sparrow falls without your Father. He never argues human beings out of fear by asserting the power of God alone, because sheer power is exactly what a frightened person is afraid of. He asserts fatherhood every time. So when you find yourself in it tonight, and if not tonight, then some night this month, try this. Do not argue with the content. Do not attempt to prove to yourself that the feared thing will not happen. You cannot, and you will lose. Instead, ask which of the three is running. It depends on me. I have to know. I am on my own, and then answer the one that is running with the corresponding word from this chapter. The birds have no barn and are fed. Today is my territory, and tomorrow is not. And the one who holds this is not a force. He is a father, and the hairs of my head are counted, and it pleased him to give me the kingdom. That is not a technique for producing calm. It is a way of putting your weight back on the structure, and the structure holds. Now, back to the text, verse 12. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, Matthew 6:33. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. We have gone slightly out of order, taking verse 34 before verse 33, and I did that on purpose because this verse is not really the conclusion of the teaching on worry. It is the replacement for it. Jesus has spent 9 verses removing something, and a soul cannot simply be emptied. It has to be given something to do instead. This is the something. Seek, zetete. It is a present imperative in the Greek, which means it describes ongoing, continuous action. Keep on seeking. Make it your habitual practice, not a single decision, but a direction of travel. And it is an active word. It is used of searching for a lost coin, hunting for something you have determined to find. This is not passive waiting. Jesus is not replacing anxiety with apathy. He is redirecting the same energy. That is the psychological genius of the sentence. Anxiety is not a lack of energy. It is enormous energy pointed at something you cannot control. You have watched yourself do this. The mental horsepower you can generate at 2 in the morning about a situation you can do nothing about at 2 in the morning is genuinely impressive. The problem is never that you lack drive. The problem is the target. So he gives a new target. First, proton. First in order, first in priority, first in the sequence of what your soul reaches for when it reaches. The kingdom of God and his righteousness. The kingdom, basileia, is not a place. It is a reign. It is the active rule of God, wherever his will is actually being done, whatever is under his government. To seek the kingdom is to seek the expansion of his rule. In your own interior life first, then in your home, your work, your relationships, the small territory you actually influence. And his righteousness, dikaiosune, is both the standing he gives you and the character he grows in you, being made right with him, and then being made right gradually in the way you live. And then the promise, all these things shall be added unto you. Prosthesetai will be added, thrown in, appended. It is almost a commercial term, the way a merchant adds something to a purchase. The things you are anxious about, food, drink, clothing, and by extension every legitimate need, are not being dismissed as unimportant. They are being reclassified. They move from being the object of your pursuit to being the accompaniment of a different pursuit. Now I want to guard this from a misuse, because this verse has been abused badly and probably in your hearing. It does not say, seek the kingdom and you will get rich. It does not say, put God first and your business will succeed, your health will hold, your marriage will be spared. The men who first heard this sentence went on to live lives of significant material hardship, and most of them died violently. Paul, who understood this teaching as well as anyone, wrote from prison that he had learned to be content both when he was full and when he was hungry. The promise is not prosperity. The promise is that your needs, as measured by a father who knows what you need before you ask him, will not be forgotten while you are occupied with his kingdom. And there is something further here that I think is the actual key to the verse, and it takes a moment to explain. Anxiety is, in a strange way, a form of self-focus. Not selfishness in the moral sense. Some of the most generous people alive are riddled with it, but a narrowing of attention until the self and its outcomes fill the entire visual field. And one of the reliable, observable, almost mechanical facts about the human soul is that this narrowing is not broken from the inside. You cannot think your way out of a self-focused loop by thinking harder about yourself, even if the thinking takes the form of self-criticism or self-help. It is broken by being given something larger to look at. That is why the practical answer to a night of worry is so often, embarrassingly, something like go and do something for another human being. Take the meal to the neighbor. Send the message to the person you have been meaning to call. Sit with the widow in your congregation for an hour, not because service is a technique for feeling better, but because seeking the kingdom pulls the eye off the self, and the eye pulled off the self is the beginning of rest. Seek first the kingdom. Give the enormous energy currently being spent on scenarios that will never happen to something that will outlast you. And discover, as generations have discovered, that your needs were being handled the whole time by someone who was never worried about them. Verse 13, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Matthew 10:29-31. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. This is the verse I promised you when we were looking at the birds, and I want to be careful with it, because it is more serious than it is usually presented and far more comforting than the sentimental version. Look at the context first, because it is brutal. This is not a passage about God caring for your daily comforts. Jesus is sending the 12 out and telling them what to expect. They will be handed over to councils, flogged in synagogues, dragged before governors, betrayed by their own families. He says plainly that brother will deliver up brother to death. And in the middle of that briefing he says, fear them not. Then the sparrows, 2 sparrows sold for a farthing. The farthing is an assarion, a Roman copper coin worth roughly the wage for the last hour of a day's labor. Sparrows were the cheapest meat available in the market, the protein of the poorest households. 2 for the smallest coin in circulation. Luke's version adds a detail that makes it sharper. 5 sparrows for 2 farthings. Buy 2 coins worth and you get a 5th bird thrown in free. That is the market value of the creature in question. It is not merely cheap. It is so cheap that one of them is a rounding error. And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. Now read that sentence again and notice what it does not say. It does not say the sparrow will not fall. It says it will not fall without your Father. The falling is assumed. Sparrows fall. That is what happens to sparrows, especially the throwaway 5th one. What Jesus asserts is not the prevention of the fall, but the presence of the Father in it. That is a harder promise than the one we want, and it is the only one that survives contact with real life. Because you already know people who were prayed for and did not recover. You may be one of them. A version of Christianity that promises that the sparrow will not fall does not last past the first funeral, but a God who is present at the fall of a bird worth less than a copper coin. That is a God who is somewhere in the room on the worst night of your life, and that claim can be tested against experience and has been by millions, and it holds. And then, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. The verb form matters. It is a perfect passive participle. They have been numbered, and the numbering stands as a completed and continuing state. Not, God could count them if he needed to. They are counted, already. The tally exists. This is a deliberately absurd image, and it is meant to be. Nobody needs to know the number of hairs on a human head. It is the least useful piece of information in the universe. It changes nothing, predicts nothing, is required for nothing, which is exactly the point. Jesus is not describing surveillance, he is describing the attention of love, which is the only kind of attention that bothers with details that serve no function. Think of how a mother knows the exact pattern of freckles on her child's shoulder. Think of the way someone who loves you knows which side of the bed you sleep on, how you take your tea, the specific sound of your car in the driveway as distinct from every other car. None of that is necessary information. It accumulates in a person because attention has been continuously and freely given over years, and it is one of the ways we recognize that we are loved rather than merely tolerated. That is the knowledge God has of you, not the knowledge of a bureaucrat with a file. The knowledge of someone who has been paying close attention to you for your entire life, including all the parts of it that nobody else noticed, including the years you were not thinking about him at all. And notice, too, the shape of the sentence. Hairs numbered, and in the same breath brother will deliver up brother to death. Jesus holds the two together without flinching and refuses to let us have either one without the other. The world contains real horror. The Father contains real, minute, tender attention. Both are true simultaneously, and the second is what makes the first bearable. Fear ye not, therefore, not because nothing can happen, because nothing can happen unnoticed, and nothing can happen unattended, and you are, in the accounting of heaven, of more value than many sparrows. Verse 14, fear not, little flock. Luke 12:32. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. This is the sentence I would choose if I could only give a frightened person one. And by the end of this teaching, I hope you understand why. It sits in Luke's version of the teaching on worry right after seek ye the kingdom of God, which means it is the emotional resolution of everything we have just walked through. Jesus has dismantled the anxiety. Now he addresses the anxious. Fear not, me phobu. Present imperative. Again, stop being afraid, cease the ongoing fear. This is not the command to never feel a moment of fright. It is the command to end the settled condition of fearfulness that has become the atmosphere of a life. Little flock. Micron poimnion. And there is a tenderness in the Greek that is even stronger than in English because both words are diminutives. A little small flock, the kind of thing you would say to something you wanted to gather up. He is looking at a group of unimpressive people in an occupied province of a vast empire. Fishermen, a tax collector, some women who funded the operation, a handful of others, and instead of pretending they are more than they are, he names it. You are little, you are a small flock. He does not tell them they are strong. He does not build their confidence by inflating their self-assessment. He tells them the truth about their size, and then tells them not to be afraid, which means the reason not to be afraid has nothing to do with their size. And here is the reason, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Eudokessen. It seemed good to him, it pleased him, he took delight in deciding it. This is not the language of reluctant permission. It is the language of a decision made with pleasure, before you asked, by someone who enjoyed making it. To give you, dunai, a gift, not to sell you, not to lend you on terms, not to award you on the basis of evaluation. Give the kingdom, not a corner of it, not a probationary membership with review after 12 months. The kingdom, the whole reign, the entire inheritance, everything. Now put those pieces together and feel the shape of it. The smallest, weakest, least significant group in the story is told that the God who runs the universe is glad to hand over the whole thing to them. It is your Father's good pleasure. The disproportion is the point. This is not a reward proportionate to merit. It is a gift wildly disproportionate to everything about the recipients, given because the giver enjoys giving it. And the reason this is the answer to fear, the real structural reason, not the sentimental one, is this. Fear is fundamentally about loss. Every specific fear you have, if you trace it down far enough, is the fear of losing something. Health, security, a person, a reputation, a future you had counted on. Control. Anxiety is the shadow cast by things we hold that can be taken. So Jesus does not address the individual fears, he addresses the ledger. He says, "Your Father has already decided to give you the kingdom," which means the most valuable thing in existence is already, irrevocably, yours by gift. And once that is settled, every other loss changes category. It does not stop hurting. Loss still hurts, and Jesus wept at a grave, but it stops being ultimate. It becomes a real wound inside a secured story rather than a threat to the story itself. That is why the little flock does not need to be a big flock. The security is not in the size of the sheep or the strength of the flock. It is in the disposition of the Father, and the Father is not nervous. And note the word Father, which is doing quiet work here. He does not say, "It is God's good pleasure." He says, "Your fathers." Every one of the anxiety teachings in the Gospels turns on this word. Your heavenly Father feedeth them. Your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. Not one of them shall fall without your Father. It is your Father's good pleasure. Jesus never once addresses human anxiety by asserting God's power alone. He always addresses it by asserting God's fatherhood, because power without fatherhood is precisely what frightened people are afraid of. So hear it, if you have been afraid for a long time. Not be braver, not have more faith, and the fear will lift. But look at who is holding this, and look at how he feels about you. And notice that he decided all of it before you ever came to him, and that it pleased him to decide it. Fear not, little flock. You are small. He is not. That is the end of the second hour. We have taken the anxious mind apart, the divided mind, the birds, the flowers, the boundary of today, the redirected pursuit, the counted hairs, and the Father's pleasure. But there is a difference between a mind quieted in an ordinary week and a soul held in a storm. So in the third hour, we go out onto the water at night, and we listen to what Jesus says when the situation is genuinely bad. Hour 3. The anchor, the words that hold when nothing else is holding. Verse 15. Peace, be still. Mark 4:39. And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. The third hour begins on water at night, in a boat that is filling faster than experienced men can empty it. Set the scene properly, because familiarity has sanded the edges of this story. The Sea of Galilee sits about 200 meters below sea level, in a basin surrounded by hills, with the Golan Heights rising steeply to the east. Cold air off those heights funnels down through the ravines and hits the warm air sitting over the water, and the result is a violent, sudden squall that can turn a flat lake into breaking waves in a matter of minutes with no warning from the sky. Fishermen who worked that water knew this and feared it. Boats of that period, we have one, recovered from the mud in 1986, roughly 8 meters long, were open craft with a shallow draft. Nothing about them survives a serious storm. Mark says a great storm of wind lay laps megale, and that the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full, not filling, full. And the men in the boat include professional fishermen who have spent their working lives on that lake. These are not tourists panicking at a bit of chop. When men who know that water believe they are dying, they are probably right. And Jesus is asleep in the stern, on a cushion. Everything about that detail is worth sitting with. The Greek suggests the raised platform at the back where a helmsman would sit, and there was apparently a leather-covered cushion kept there. He is not merely resting, he is deeply asleep. Asleep through noise and motion and water coming over the side. Asleep because he is genuinely exhausted from days of teaching to crowds so dense that his family thought he had lost his mind. This is one of the clearest windows in the Gospels into the actual humanity of Jesus. He got tired the way you get tired, and it is one of the clearest windows into something else too. He is asleep during the storm. Whatever peace he later hands over in the upper room, my peace I give unto you. This is what it looks like in practice. It looks like a man sleeping through the thing that is terrifying everyone else in the boat. Then they wake him, and their words are one of the most honest sentences any believer has ever spoken. Master, carest thou not that we perish? That is not a request. It is an accusation. And I want you to notice that Jesus does not scold them for the accusation, because there is something deeply important in the fact that this sentence made it into the gospel at all. When the storm is bad enough and long enough, the question underneath fear is never really about power. It is about care. Nobody in that boat doubted he could do something. They doubted he minded. That is your question too, isn't it? Not, is God able, but, does he actually care that this is happening to me? That question, asked in the dark, with the water rising, is not blasphemy. It is in the Bible, spoken by the men closest to him, and preserved by the church for 2,000 years without embarrassment. And then he stands up in a boat that is full of water and speaks to the weather. He rebuked the wind, epitimao, the same verb used when he casts out demons, a word of authority spoken to something that has no business behaving as it is behaving. And to the sea he says two words, siopa, pefimoso, peace, be still. And the second word is remarkable. Fimu means to muzzle. It is what you do to an animal's mouth to stop it. It is in the perfect tense, which in Greek carries the sense of a completed action with a permanent result. Be muzzled and stay muzzled. He speaks to a storm the way you speak to a large dog that has been barking at a child. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Mark uses the same adjective for the calm that he used for the storm. A great storm, and then a great calm. The size of the peace matched the size of the chaos exactly. Now, the physics of it is worth one sentence, because it is the kind of detail that makes the account feel real. When the wind stops on open water, the waves do not stop. Swell persists for a long time after the wind that raised it has died. What Mark describes is not merely the wind ceasing, but the water going instantly flat. Galene Megale, a great calm, which is not how weather behaves. Whatever those men were looking at, it was not a coincidence of timing. And here is where I want to bring this to the person watching, because there are two ways to receive this story, and only one of them will hold. The first way is, Jesus calms storms, therefore he will calm mine. And sometimes he does. Sometimes the scan comes back clear, the offer comes through, the marriage turns, the child comes home, and it is right to call that what it is and give thanks. But sometimes the storm does not stop, and if this story only means that God removes bad weather, then it becomes a source of torment rather than comfort for everyone whose weather did not change. So look again at what actually happened in that boat, in order. Before the wind stopped, there was already a person present in the boat who was not afraid of it. The peace was in the vessel the entire time. It was sleeping in the stern while they bailed. The calm that came at the end was a demonstration of who he was. The calm that was there from the beginning was the thing they had failed to notice, which means the promise here is not primarily that your storm will end, though it may. The promise is that the one who is not afraid of it is in the boat with you, and that his composure is not dependent on the weather, and that he intends to hand that composure over to you. Verse 16, Why are ye so fearful? Mark 4:40. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? He calms the sea first, and then he turns to the men and he asks two questions. And I want to spend a whole teaching on those two questions, because how you hear his tone here will determine a great deal about how you relate to God for the rest of your life. Most of us hear this as anger. We supply a tone of exasperation because that is the tone we expect from authority when we have failed. But the Greek gives no such indication, and the pattern of Jesus' behavior everywhere else in the Gospels gives us strong reason to hear it otherwise. This is the same man who, when Peter sank in the water a few chapters later, reached out his hand immediately. First the rescue, then the question. This is the same man who restored Peter after the denial by asking 3 gentle questions over breakfast. So hear these as diagnostic rather than punitive. A physician asking where it hurts is not accusing you of hurting. Why are ye so fearful? Ti deiloi este. And the word deilos is interesting because it is not the ordinary word for fear. It carries the sense of cowardice, of timidity, of being overcome by dread to the point of being unable to act. It is the opposite of courage. And notice that in the same passage, after the sea goes calm, Mark says the disciples feared exceedingly. But there he uses a different construction, ephebethison phobon megan, and it is the fear of awe, of realizing what is standing in the boat with you. Jesus is not asking why they experience fear. He is asking why the fear became the governing reality. Then the second question, how is it that ye have no faith? And here is what makes this question so useful and so much kinder than it first appears. Their faith was not absent. They woke him. Think about that. In the middle of a storm, professional sailors who had exhausted their own competence turned to a carpenter from Nazareth and woke him up. Why? Not because he was a better sailor. They went to him because somewhere in them was a conviction that he could do something about it. That is faith. Small, panicked, accusatory faith with the tone all wrong, but faith. What they lacked was not the presence of faith, but the operation of it under pressure. And that is the actual human problem, isn't it? Most of the people watching this believe. You would say so if asked. The difficulty is not the belief. It is that the belief does not seem to reach the place where the fear lives. You can hold a doctrine firmly in your mind at 11 in the morning and be undone by it at 3 in the morning. And the gap between those two experiences is where most of the Christian life is actually lived. Jesus is putting his finger exactly on that gap. And the question, how is it that ye have no faith, is asked in the calm after the rescue, which is the only time such a question can be usefully heard. There is one more thing in this passage that I do not want you to miss, and it is in the detail of what he said before they ever set out. Look at verse 35. Let us pass over unto the other side. That was the instruction. That was the stated destination given by him before the boat left shore, which means the storm hit them inside his will, on an errand he assigned, going in the direction he named. Sit with that, because it dismantles one of the most persistent and cruel assumptions in religious life, that trouble is evidence of having gone wrong, that if you were in the center of God's will, the water would be calm. The disciples were exactly where he told them to be, doing exactly what he told them to do, and the storm came anyway, and he was asleep through the worst of it. So if you are in a storm right now and have spent months searching your life for the mistake that caused it, the unconfessed sin, the wrong decision, the missing faith, hear this. Sometimes the storm is the consequence of a wrong turn, and God is gracious enough to let consequences teach us. But sometimes the storm is simply what happened on the crossing he sent you on, and the question in the boat is not, what did I do wrong? It is who is in here with me. Verse 17, be of good cheer. It is I. Matthew 14:27. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. This is the verse this whole study was built around, because it is spoken in the fourth watch of the night, the last 4 hours of darkness. The vigil you are keeping right now. The scene is a few chapters after the first storm, and it is different in an important way. This time, Jesus is not in the boat. Matthew tells us he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away, and then he went up into a mountain alone to pray. So the disciples are on the water at night without him, because he put them there. And the wind is contrary. Matthew says the ship was in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. Mark adds the detail that he saw them toiling in rowing, basanizomenos, a word that literally means tormented, tortured, put to the test. They are rowing all night and going nowhere. And then the timing, in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. The Roman night ran from 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning, divided into 4 watches of 3 hours each, and in the Jewish reckoning of the time, 3 watches of 4. Either way, the fourth watch is the last stretch before dawn, roughly 3 to 6 in the morning. They have been fighting the water for something like 9 hours. Why does he wait? That is the honest question, and I am not going to give you a tidy answer, because Matthew does not. But notice what 9 hours of rowing does. It exhausts every human resource. At hour 1, strong men row. At hour 4, they endure. At hour 9, in the dark, in the cold, with the shore no closer than when they started, a person arrives at the end of what they can produce. And it is precisely there, not before, that he comes. I have watched this pattern in enough lives to say it plainly. God very often arrives at the end of our competence rather than at the beginning of our need. Not because he enjoys the delay, because there is something we can only receive with empty hands, and the hands do not empty early. Then, something almost comic and deeply human happens. They see him, and they are more frightened than they were by the storm. They cried out for fear, saying, "It is a spirit." Their theology in that moment permitted a storm, but not a rescue. They could accept that the universe contained deadly weather. What they could not immediately process was a figure walking calmly across the surface of the thing that was killing them, which is worth noting about your own dark hours. Sometimes the help does not look like help at first. Sometimes the thing coming toward you across the water is misread as one more threat, because fear interprets everything as threat. And the churned water we spoke of earlier makes it impossible to see clearly. And so he speaks immediately. Straightway, Matthew says, at once. And he says 3 things. Be of good cheer. Tharsaite. Take courage. Be bold. Have confidence. It is a military word, the sort of thing a commander says to men before something difficult. It is not a request that they feel differently. It is an order to take a courage that is being handed to them. It is I, ego eimi. And in the Greek, this is 2 words that mean literally I am. It is the ordinary way of saying it is me, and it is also unmistakably the divine name given to Moses at the burning bush. I am that I am. John's Gospel will make enormous use of this phrase, and every Jewish man in that boat had grown up hearing it in the Scriptures. In the fourth watch, on the water, in the dark, the answer to their terror is a name. Be not afraid, me phobiasthe. Stop being afraid. Notice the structure of those 3 phrases, because it is a complete pastoral theology in 9 words of English. First, a command they cannot obey on their own. Then, a revelation of who is present. Then, the command again, now possible, because of what stands between the 2. That is how fear actually breaks, not by trying harder to be brave at the front end, but by having something placed in the middle. It is I. The courage on either side of that phrase depends entirely on the phrase itself. And then there is Peter, who does the most Peter thing in all of Scripture. Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And Jesus says one word, come. And Peter goes over the side. He walks, genuinely actually walks on water, which is more than any of us have done. And then he sees the wind boisterous, and he's afraid. and beginning to sink, he cries out with the second shortest prayer in the Bible, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him. Immediately. Euthios. There is no lecture first. There is no pause for instruction. The hand comes out at once, and the correction, "O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?" comes after Peter is already held, already safe, already being walked back to the boat. That is the order of operations with God, and if you learn nothing else from the third hour, learn this: the hand first, the conversation after. Whatever you are sinking in tonight, the sequence is not, "Get your faith right and then he will help you." It is, "Cry out, be caught, and have the conversation about your faith later from a position of safety in the boat with the wind already dying down." Verse 18, "Let not your heart be troubled." John 14:1. "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me." We return to the upper room, and to a sentence that has been read at more funerals than almost any other words in the English language. The setting has not changed since we looked at John 14:27 in the first hour. It is the last night. The betrayer has gone. Peter has just been told he will deny his Lord 3 times before the rooster crows. And we should pause on that, because the chapter division in our Bibles obscures something important. There is no gap between Peter's devastation and this sentence. Jesus says to Peter, "The cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice," and then, without a break, turns to the whole room and says, "Let not your heart be troubled." The comfort is addressed to men who have just been told they are going to fail. That is not incidental. If your picture of God's comfort is that it becomes available once you have proven reliable, look at the sequence here. The one who has just been told he will crack under pressure in a courtyard before sunrise is included in the "you" of "let not your heart be troubled." The word troubled is tarasso again. The churning, the stirring up, the water made cloudy so nothing can be seen. And this time we should notice something that translations tend to smooth over. John uses this same verb of Jesus himself. He was troubled in spirit at the tomb of Lazarus. He said, "Now is my soul troubled," when he contemplated the cross. So this is not a command issued from a distance by someone who has never felt the churn. It is one troubled heart speaking to a room full of them, offering something he has been using himself. Then the remedy, "Ye believe in God, believe also in me." The Greek can be read either as 2 statements or as 2 commands, or as one of each, and the ambiguity is probably intentional. But the force is clear. Jesus places belief in himself in the same category, at the same level, with the same weight as belief in God. To a room of monotheistic Jewish men, for whom the oneness of God was the central confession recited daily, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." This is not a small remark. It is either blasphemy or the most important claim in the room. But look at what he is actually prescribing as the treatment for a troubled heart, because it is not what we would prescribe. He does not say, "Calm down." He does not say, "Focus on your breathing." He does not say, "Think about how these things usually work out." He says, "Believe," pistuet, which in the Greek is not primarily intellectual assent, but active trust, leaning your weight on something. That is the mechanism. The antidote to a churning heart is not the absence of trouble. It is the redirection of trust. And it works the way it works with a bridge. You do not stop being afraid of the drop by staring at the drop, but by putting your weight on the structure and discovering that it holds. And then he gives them a reason in the next 2 verses. And it is one of the tenderest things in the New Testament. "In my Father's house are many mansions." We will take that in full in the 4th hour. But hold the connection now, because the argument of the passage is, "Do not let your heart churn, because trust is available, and because there is a place prepared for you, and because I am coming back for you personally." He does not comfort them by minimizing what is about to happen. He comforts them by widening the frame until the terrible thing about to happen is contained inside something much larger. That is what real comfort does, and it is worth learning the difference. False comfort shrinks the trouble. It tells you it is not that bad, that you will be fine, that everything happens for a reason in the shallow sense. Real comfort leaves the trouble at full size and enlarges the world around it until there is room to stand. A pause in the third hour. 4 things. This rest is not. We are 3 hours in, and I want to stop again, because by now some of you have been quietly frustrated for a while, and it would be dishonest to keep going without naming why. The frustration goes something like this. Everything you are saying is beautiful. I believe most of it, and I have believed it for years, and I am still tired, and I still wake up at 4. And the last time somebody told me that Jesus gives rest, I nodded and went home and lay in the dark, feeling like a failure at one more thing. If that is where you are, this section is for you, and I want to clear 4 misunderstandings out of the way, because I think they are doing real damage. The first. This rest is not the absence of feeling. There is a version of Christian peace floating around that amounts to emotional flatness. The serene believer who does not react, does not grieve loudly, does not get afraid. That person does not appear anywhere in the Gospels, and specifically, that person is not Jesus. He wept at a grave publicly in front of a crowd over a man he was about to raise from the dead, which means the weeping was not about the outcome, but about the fact that death is a horror and he hated it. He was troubled in spirit. He was in agony in a garden to the point of physical collapse. He asked out loud for the cup to be taken from him. The peace we have been studying coexisted in the one person who had it perfectly, with sweat like drops of blood. So if you have been measuring your spiritual health by the absence of hard feelings, you have been using an instrument that would have declared Jesus faithless in Gethsemane. Feeling the weight is not the failure. Feeling it alone, with nowhere to put it, is the thing he came to end. The second, this rest is not a reward for spiritual performance. Read the invitation again and notice who it was extended to. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. Not all ye who have maintained a consistent devotional life. The qualification is exhaustion, which means it is structurally impossible to be too tired, too far behind, or too spiritually inconsistent to qualify. Those things are the entry criteria, not the disqualifiers. If you have been treating rest as something that becomes available once your prayer life improves, you have inverted the entire passage. You do not get rested enough to come. You come and are rested. The third, this rest is not a single event. I think this misunderstanding causes more quiet despair than any other. Somewhere along the way, many of us picked up the idea that there is a moment, a service, a decision, a night of prayer, where the burden comes off permanently, and that if you have to keep coming back, something has gone wrong. But look at the words Jesus actually used. Abide, a continuous staying, not a single arrival. Seek, a present imperative, keep on seeking. Take my yoke, an ongoing walk beside him day after day in the same direction. Even the manna in the wilderness, which is the great picture of God's provision, was daily and could not be stored. So you will have to come back tomorrow. That is not a sign of failure. That is the design. The Christian life is not one enormous surrender followed by 50 years of coasting. It is 10,000 small returns, most of them unremarkable, in a kitchen or a car or a hospital corridor, each one taking about 4 seconds. Do not be discouraged that you have to keep doing this. Nobody outgrows needing bread. The fourth, this rest is not a substitute for the things a body needs. I want to say this plainly because religious language can be used to spiritualize away real, physical, practical problems, and that is not care, it is negligence. If you are sleeping 4 hours a night, some of what you are calling a spiritual crisis is a sleep crisis. If you have not had a genuine day off in 7 months, some of what you are calling faithlessness is depletion. If you are grieving and have never once spoken about it to a human being, some of what you are calling darkness is grief that has nowhere to go. If your body has been sending alarm signals for a year and you have not seen a doctor, prayer is not a reason to keep not seeing one. Look at what God did for Elijah under the juniper tree. Here is a prophet who has just called down fire from heaven, and days later he is sitting in a desert asking God to let him die. And the first thing God does is not correct his theology and not rebuke his despair. An angel touches him and gives him food and lets him sleep, and then wakes him and feeds him again and lets him sleep again. 2 meals and 2 naps before a single word of instruction. The still small voice comes later, after the body has been cared for. Jesus, in the same way, told the disciples to come apart and rest a while, a physical instruction addressed to physical exhaustion given by the Son of God on a week when the need was enormous. So take the nap, see the doctor, say no to the thing you have been dreading saying no to. None of that is a substitute for what we have been talking about, and none of what we have been talking about is a substitute for it. Grace is not opposed to sleep. It is generally in favor of it. Now, back to the upper room and to the most honest sentence Jesus ever spoke about what your life is going to be like. Verse 19, I have overcome the world. John 16:33. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. This is the last sentence of Jesus' final discourse before he goes out to the garden to be arrested, and it is constructed with such care that every clause does a different job. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. He states his purpose. Everything he has been saying for 3 chapters, and the vine, the Spirit, the Father's house, the sorrow that turns to joy, has had one aim, that they might have peace. And notice the location of the peace, in me. Not in your circumstances, not in your understanding, not in your improved emotional regulation. In him, the peace has an address, and the address is a person. In the world ye shall have tribulation, and now the honesty, which is one of the great mercies of the Christian faith. Not you might encounter difficulty, not if things go badly, shall have. It is stated as certainty in the same breath as the peace, without any attempt to soften it. The word is thlipsis, and it comes from a verb meaning to press or crush. It was used of the pressure applied to grapes in a wine press and of the crushing weight of a stone. It is not the word for a minor irritation. It is the word for being compressed from multiple directions at once until something gives. I want you to notice how honest this is, because there is an entire industry of religious speech that will not say this sentence. There are churches you can walk into this Sunday where the message will be, functionally, that faith exempts you from pressure, and that if you are being crushed, something in your believing has malfunctioned. Jesus, on his last night, told his closest friends the truth. In this world you will be pressed. It is coming. Every one of them went on to prove it, most of them with their lives. And then, in the middle of that unflinching honesty, but be of good cheer. Tharsight, the same word from the water in the 4th watch. Take courage. And it is worth pausing on the fact that this word appears in Jesus' mouth almost exclusively in situations of genuine crisis. To a paralyzed man, to a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, to terrified men in a boat, and here, hours before the cross. He never says it when things are pleasant. Tharseita is a storm word. Then the reason, I have overcome the world, nenikeka ton kosmon, and the tense is the point. It is perfect tense, a completed action with results that continue into the present. I have overcome, and the overcoming stands. But look at when he says it, not on Easter morning, not standing outside an empty tomb with the linen folded. He says it on Thursday night, hours before he is arrested, and roughly 18 hours before he dies. From every visible angle, he's about to lose comprehensively. The betrayal is in motion. The trial is scheduled. The cross is already being prepared. And he uses the perfect tense. It is done, which tells you that in his understanding, the victory was not going to be won in spite of the cross. It was going to be won by means of it. The thing that looked like total defeat was the mechanism of the overcoming. That is why he can speak in the perfect tense before it happens, because from where he stands, the outcome is not in doubt, and the road to it runs directly through the worst night in human history. And now bring that to your own situation, because this is where it becomes usable. You are probably in the middle of something whose outcome you cannot see, and your instinct, mine too, is to want the reassurance that it will resolve well. That is not what is on offer here. What is on offer is a different kind of certainty, that whatever is pressing you belongs to a world whose defeat has already been secured, and that you are not fighting toward a victory that is still in question. You are living inside the mopping up of a war whose decisive battle is over. The tribulation is real, Jesus said so in the same sentence. But the tribulation is on the losing side, and it does not know it yet, and you do. Verse 20, I will not leave you comfortless. John 14:18, I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. 5 words in the Greek, and they answer the deepest fear a human being has. The word translated comfortless is orphanos. Orphans. That is the actual word, and every English translation that softens it loses something essential. I will not leave you as orphans. Understand what he is addressing. These men left their livelihoods, their families, their villages, their futures to follow him. For 3 years, their entire identity has been organized around physical proximity to one person. They eat where he eats. They sleep where he sleeps. Every decision has been made by watching what he does. And he has just told them repeatedly over the course of one evening that he is leaving. In the ancient world, an orphan was not merely a child who had lost a parent emotionally. An orphan was a person without economic protection, without legal standing, without a name to invoke, without anyone whose obligation it was to intervene on their behalf. Widows and orphans appear together constantly in Scripture precisely because they occupied the same structural position, exposed. That is the condition he promises they will not be left in. And I would say to you that underneath a great deal of the anxiety we have been discussing for 2 hours, this is the taproot. Not fear of any specific outcome, the fear of being fundamentally alone with it. Ask anyone who has been through something terrible what made it survivable, and they will almost never say the absence of pain. They will say a person, someone who stayed, someone in the room. The terror is not primarily suffering, it is unaccompanied suffering. I will not leave you as orphans, and then I will come to you. Erchomai pros humus. And the tense is present, which in Greek can carry a vividness that the English future loses. I am coming to you, not eventually in some distant arrangement. The whole passage makes clear what he means. Within days, the Spirit whom he has just called another comforter, allos parakletos, another of the same kind as myself, one called alongside to help, will come and be with them and in them permanently. So the departure is not an abandonment, it is a change in the mode of presence. He is trading proximity for indwelling. Instead of being with them in a body that can only be in one place at a time, he will be in them, in all of them, everywhere, simultaneously, forever. And this is why the whole of Christian rest is not finally a technique or a doctrine, but a relationship with a present person. When we spoke in the first hour about anapao, the rest that is done to you rather than achieved by you, this is the machinery of it. The one who does the resting to you is not far off. He has taken up residence, which means the words we have been studying for 3 hours are not the recorded sayings of an absent teacher. They are the current speech of a present Lord. He is not quoted here. He is here. I will not leave you as orphans. Whatever else is true about tonight, that is true. You are not, in the deepest sense available to language, alone in it. Verse 21. Lo, I am with you always. Matthew 28:20. Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. And now the last sentence of Matthew's Gospel, which is the sentence Jesus chose to leave hanging in the air as the final thing on record. Think about that for a moment. Of everything he could have said as a closing line, a summary of doctrine, a warning, a prediction, a final instruction, the last words Matthew preserves are a promise of presence. Lo, idu, behold, look at this, pay attention. I am with you. Ego methuman emi. And notice again that phrase at the front, ego emi. I am. The same 2 words spoken in the 4th watch on the water, the same words spoken at the burning bush. He puts the divine name on either side of the promise, and the little word between them is with always. The Greek is pasas tas hemeros, all the days, not always in the abstract timeless sense, all the days, every one of them individually in sequence, which is a different and better promise because you do not live in the abstract, you live on Tuesday. And the promise is not a general statement about God's eternal nature. It is a commitment to be present on each specific day you are going to have to get through, including the ones you are dreading, including the anniversary you are not looking forward to, including the appointment on the calendar you keep looking at, including the ordinary Wednesday when nothing is wrong and you feel hollow anyway. All the days, even unto the end of the world. Heos tes sunteleas tu ionos, until the completion of the age, until everything is finished. There is no expiry date, no clause, no set of conditions under which the presence is withdrawn. And here is what makes this sentence extraordinary rather than merely comforting. Look at who he says it to. Verse 17, 3 verses earlier. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. That is Matthew being honest in his final paragraph. On a mountain in Galilee, looking at a resurrected man, some of them still doubted. And Jesus gives the commission to that group, the worshippers and the doubters together, undivided, with no separate instructions for each, and then promises to be with all of them, all the days, to the end of the age. If you are in the doubting half of that group today, you are still in the sentence. Now let me draw the 3rd hour to a close by putting the storm passages together, because they say one thing when they are laid side by side. In Mark 4, he is in the boat, asleep, and the storm rages, and the lesson is that his peace is present in the vessel before the weather changes. In Matthew 14, he is not in the boat, and they row all night against the wind, and he comes in the 4th watch, and the lesson is that he arrives at the end of our strength rather than the beginning, and that the hand comes out before the correction. In John 14 and 16, there is no water at all. The storm is in the room, and it is grief and betrayal and fear of the future, and the lesson is that he does not shrink the trouble, but widens the world around it, and tells the truth about pressure while announcing that the outcome is already secured. And in Matthew 28, standing on a mountain with a group that is half worshipping and half doubting, the last thing he says is, I am with you all the days. 4 scenes, 1 claim. The anchor is not the calm. The anchor is the person, and he does not leave the boat. Which brings us to the fourth hour and to the deepest thing we will do today. Because everything so far has addressed your circumstances, your mind, and your storms. In the last movement, we go underneath all of it, to the restlessness that remains even when the circumstances are fine, and to what Jesus says about where a human soul finally comes to rest. Hour 4, the deep rest, the words that reach the place underneath everything. Verse 22, abide in me. John 15:4, abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me. The fourth hour begins with a single word, and it may be the most important word in this entire study. The word is meno. It is translated abide in the King James, remain in most modern versions, and it appears 11 times in the space of a few verses in John 15, which is John's way of underlining. It means to stay, to dwell, to take up residence, and not leave. It is the ordinary Greek word for living somewhere, the word you would use for the house you actually inhabit, as opposed to a place you are passing through. And Jesus makes it a command. Abide in me, which is a strange kind of command because it is not an instruction to do something. It is an instruction to stop leaving. Consider the image he chose, because he could have chosen anything, and the vine is deliberate. In the Old Testament, the vine is Israel, Isaiah 5, Psalm 80, Jeremiah 2, and it is almost always used in passages of disappointment, the vineyard that was planted with care and produced wild grapes. When Jesus says, I am the true vine, he is stepping into a very loaded image and claiming to be its fulfillment. But the practical picture is what concerns us here. A branch does not produce fruit by effort. This is the thing to see. There is no such thing as a strenuous branch. A branch does not tense up in the spring and concentrate on grape production. Fruit appears on a branch as the natural and inevitable consequence of one thing only: sustained connection to the vine. The sap moves, the branch receives, and in due season something grows that the branch did not manufacture. Now think about how much of your spiritual life has been organized around the opposite assumption, trying harder to be patient, straining to be more loving, deciding with real sincerity to be less anxious, and finding that the decision lasts about 4 days, working at the fruit, directly, as a production problem. Jesus says, that is not how any of this functions, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, cannot, not, finds it difficult, cannot. The mechanism does not exist. And then the negative statement that ought to be more famous than it is, without me, ye can do nothing. Choris emu, u dunaste poien uden. Apart from me, you are able to do nothing. Not you will find things harder. Not your results will be diminished. Nothing. That sentence has broken a great many self-reliant people, and the breaking has usually been the best thing that ever happened to them. But here is what I most want you to hear from this passage, and it is the connection to everything we have been doing for 4 hours. Abiding is not an activity. It is the absence of departure, which means the question is not, what must I do in order to abide? The question is, what am I doing that constitutes leaving? And when you ask it that way, the answer usually becomes uncomfortably clear. We leave by getting busy in a way that crowds him out entirely. We leave by shifting, almost imperceptibly, from receiving to performing, from being a branch to trying to be a whole vine. We leave through the slow accumulation of unaddressed guilt that makes us not want to be in the room. We leave by numbing, by filling every silence with sound, by never once, during a whole day, being alone with our own thoughts and His presence at the same time. Abiding, practically, looks less like a heroic spiritual discipline and more like a stubborn refusal to go away. It is turning back at the point where you notice you have drifted, which is 50 times a day, and each time simply returning without dramatics. It is the running conversation. It is the habit of talking to him about the thing while the thing is happening, rather than afterward in a formal report. And Jesus adds, "And I in you." The abiding is mutual. This is not a lonely vigilance where you cling to a God who might slip away if your attention lapses. He abides in you. He has moved in. The branch does not have to hold onto the vine by strength of grip. It is joined to it organically at the point of connection. And that, at last, is the answer to the question this whole study has been circling. How does a person actually receive the rest Jesus offers? Not by mastering a technique, not by achieving a state, by staying connected to a person ordinarily, daily, over years, and letting the life move. The fruit will come. It always does on a branch that stays. Verse 23, "No man shall pluck them out of my hand." John 10:27-28. "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand." If the last verse dealt with connection, this one deals with security, and I want to take it slowly, because there is a particular kind of exhaustion that only this verse can touch. There are people watching this whose tiredness is not from work or worry, but from uncertainty about their standing. People who have prayed the same prayer of surrender 100 times because they were never sure the previous 99 took. People who have lain in bed running an audit of their own sincerity. People who love God and are quietly terrified that at some point they will fail badly enough to be dropped. If that is you, this verse was written for you, and I want you to feel the whole weight of it. My sheep hear my voice. Look first at the possessive, my. Before anything is said about their behavior, their identity is established. They belong to him. Everything else in the sentence proceeds from that. Hear my voice. Sheep in that world were not driven from behind, as they are with dogs in some cultures. They were led from the front by a shepherd who walked ahead and called. Multiple flocks could be watered at the same well or sheltered in the same enclosure overnight, and then separated in the morning by nothing more than each shepherd walking away calling, and each flock sorting itself out by ear. Travelers in the region have documented it for centuries. The sheep know the voice, which means the mark of belonging is not that you never wander. It is that a particular voice registers with you in a way it does not for others. If something in you responds when Jesus speaks, if these words have been landing somewhere real for 4 hours, if you find yourself wanting him, that response is itself evidence. Sheep that do not belong to him do not find his voice compelling, and I know them. Gnosko, the word for relational knowledge, experiential knowledge, the knowing of a person rather than the knowing of a fact. This is the counted hairs knowledge from the second hour applied, and they follow me. Note the order one more time, because Scripture keeps insisting on it and we keep getting it backwards. Hearing, then being known, then following. The following is third. It is the consequence of belonging, not the qualification for it. And I give unto them eternal life. Didomi I give, present tense, ongoing. Not I will give them at the end if the record holds up. I give. And now the 3 securities stacked, each one stronger than the last. They shall never perish. And the Greek here is emphatic in a way English simply cannot carry. Ume apolontai eis ton iona. It is a double negative, the strongest form of negation available in the language, combined with a phrase meaning unto the age. Not in any way whatsoever, not ever, not into eternity shall they perish. Jesus is using the grammatical equivalent of underlining a sentence 3 times. Neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. Harpazo, to snatch, to seize by force, to carry off by violence. It is the word used of a wolf attacking the flock earlier in the same chapter. Nothing can seize them out of his grip. And then verse 29, which is the part people forget, my Father, which gave them me, is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. Two hands. The sheep is held by the Son, and the Son's hand is held in the Father's, and no force in existence can get through both. Now the objection rises immediately, because it always does, and it deserves a straight answer. What about me? Not another man snatching me. What about my own failure? What if I let go? Here is the answer the passage gives, and you have to look at the image rather than the argument. Sheep are, by universal agreement of everyone who has ever kept them, not clever animals. They wander. They eat their way lost, head down, one tuft at a time, until they look up and have no idea where they are. Jesus knew this perfectly well. 2 chapters earlier in Luke, he tells a story about a shepherd who leaves 99 to go after one, and in that story, the sheep does not find its way back. It is found. It is carried home on the shoulders of the one who went looking. Nothing in this passage suggests that the security depends on the competence of the sheep. Everything in it locates the security in the strength of the hand, and that is a rest that reaches a place nothing else reaches. Because if your standing depends in any measure on your performance, then every bad week is a threat to your salvation, and you can never fully relax in the presence of God, and the relationship will always have an undertone of audit. But if you are held by two hands that no force can open, then your failures become what they actually are in the Christian life: real, grievous, worth repenting of, and utterly unable to change whose you are. The sheep is not safe because it is a good sheep. It is safe because of whose hand it is in. Verse 24. If any man thirst, John 7:37-38. In the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the Scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Now we come to the restlessness that survives every improvement in your circumstances, and Jesus addresses it with the image of thirst. The setting is essential here, and it is one of the most dramatic pieces of staging in the Gospels. This is the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the 3 great pilgrimage festivals, and Jerusalem is packed. For 7 days, the people have lived in temporary shelters made of branches, remembering the wilderness years when their ancestors had no permanent home, and were kept alive entirely by daily provision from God. And every morning of the feast, a priest carried a golden pitcher down to the pool of Siloam, filled it with water, and processed back up to the temple through the water gate, accompanied by trumpets and singing, and poured it out at the base of the altar. The ceremony recalled the water that came from the rock in the desert when the nation was dying of thirst, and it looked forward to the promise in the prophets of water poured out on dry ground. On the 7th and greatest day, according to the traditions we have, the procession circled the altar 7 times. It was the climax of the whole festival, and it is at that moment Jesus stood and cried, John says, using a verb for shouting krazo, that a Galilean carpenter's son raises his voice above the ceremony and says, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He is interrupting the water ceremony to announce that he is what it was about. Now the content. If any man thirst. Thirst is not a preference. Hunger can be ignored for a surprisingly long time. Thirst cannot. It escalates. It takes over the mind. A thirsty person cannot think about anything else for very long, and in a desert climate the urgency is not academic. Jesus chooses the most inescapable bodily need there is to describe a spiritual condition, and the condition he is describing is the one we have been circling for 4 hours, the restlessness that does not resolve, the thing in you that has never quite been satisfied by anything you have obtained. You have had the experience, everyone has, of finally getting the thing you were certain would settle you, and holding it, and finding that the settling did not occur. The job, the relationship, the house, the number in the account, the recognition. There is a strange grief in that moment that people rarely talk about because it feels ungrateful. But it is one of the most reliable data points about human beings. Nothing in the created order fits the whole. Augustine put it in a sentence that has outlived 16 centuries. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. That is a comment on this verse and on the whole of this study. The rest we have been talking about for 4 hours is not merely relief from pressure, it is the end of thirst. Let him come unto me and drink. 2 verbs, and neither of them is achieve. Come and drink. It is the same structure as Matthew 11, come, and the same posture as Mary at his feet, receiving. And then the promise that goes further than anyone expected. He that believeth on me, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Out of his belly, koilia, the innermost part, the deepest interior, the place where you actually live, the one we called souche in the first hour. Rivers, plural, not a trickle, not a cup, not a carefully rationed supply. Rivers of living water, and living water in the Hebrew idiom meant moving water, spring-fed rather than standing. Cistern water was still, warm, stagnant. Living water was cold, moving, fresh, alive. And notice the direction. He does not say the water will flow into you and stop. He says it will flow out of you. The person who comes thirsty and drinks becomes in time a source for other thirsty people. That is the whole pattern of the Christian life in one image. You receive at the point of your emptiness, and what you receive does not stay in you, and you end up carrying water to people whose thirst you understand precisely because you had it yourself. John adds a note of explanation. This spake he of the Spirit, which they that believe on him should receive. So the deep rest of the 4th hour is not a state you enter alone in a quiet room. It is a spring installed in your interior by a person permanently. If any man thirst, any, he shouted it over a ceremony into a crowd of thousands on the loudest day of the year so that nobody could claim they were not included. Verse 25. I am the bread of life. John 6:35. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. Water and now bread. And there is a reason these two belong together, because thirst and hunger are the 2 hungers of the soul, and Jesus claims to be the answer to both in the same sentence. The setting is the day after the feeding of the 5,000. The crowd has crossed the lake looking for him, and Jesus, who never let anyone hold on to a comfortable illusion for long, tells them exactly why they came. Ye seek me, not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves, and were filled. They wanted more bread. He's about to tell them that he is the bread, but first he says something we should not skip. Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life. And then, when they ask what they must do to work the works of God, he gives one of the most quietly revolutionary answers in the Gospels. This is the work of God, that ye believe on him whom he hath sent. The work is to believe, the labor is trust. Every religious instinct in the human being wants a task list, and Jesus reduces the task list to a relationship. Then, I am the bread of life, ego emiho artos tes zois, the first of the great I am statements in John's Gospel, and again the divine name is sitting in the front of the sentence. Consider the choice of image, because bread is not an impressive substance. If you wanted to make a grand claim about yourself, bread is not where you would go. Bread in that world was not a side item, it was the substance of life, eaten at every meal, the thing that stood between a family and hunger. It was also entirely ordinary, entirely daily, and entirely unglamorous. Nobody framed bread. Nobody wrote poems about the loaf. You just ate it every single day, and you died without it. That is how Jesus describes himself. not as an occasional spiritual luxury, as the daily, unremarkable, absolutely necessary substance that a life is built out of. And there is a deliberate connection to the manna which the crowd raises themselves. Our fathers did eat manna in the desert. Jesus takes it and turns it. Moses gave them bread from heaven that kept them alive for a day and then spoiled. The true bread from heaven is the one who gives life to the world permanently. Then the twin promises, "He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst." Look at the two verbs, cometh and believeth. They are placed in parallel, which means Jesus is treating them as the same movement described two ways. Coming is believing. Believing is coming. This is not two separate spiritual transactions. It is one motion of a person toward a person. And the negations are, once again, the strongest form available in Greek. Oumi, never, not in any way, under no circumstances. But we have to be careful and honest here, because a naive reading of this promise runs straight into experience. Every believer watching this has been hungry since believing. Every one of us has had dry seasons, dark nights, months where prayer felt like talking into a wall. So what does never hunger mean? It means the source is settled, not that the appetite is abolished. Think about it this way. A person who has no food and no prospect of any is in a fundamentally different condition from a person who is hungry at 4 in the afternoon and knows dinner is at 6. Both feel hunger. Only one of them is in danger. The first hunger is terror. The second is anticipation. That is the change Jesus is describing. He does not remove the appetite. In fact, coming to him tends to sharpen it, and people who have walked with him longest often describe a hunger for God that is more intense at 70 than it was at 20. What he removes is the desperation. You are no longer scavenging. You are no longer trying to extract from your job, your spouse, your children, your accomplishments, a nourishment they were never able to provide and were never designed to provide. The source has been located. The hunger, when it comes, now has somewhere to go. And that reorders every other relationship in your life for the better. The most common way human love is destroyed is by asking a human being to be bread. No person can bear the weight of being someone's ultimate source, and the attempt eventually crushes them and embitters you. When Christ becomes the bread, your spouse gets to be your spouse, your children get to be your children, your work gets to be your work. Real, precious, and no longer required to do the impossible. A pause in the 4th hour, the long story of rest from Genesis to the end. We are nearly at the end of the 28, and before we take the last 3, I want to pull back and show you something that you can only see from a distance, because the rest Jesus offers is not a New Testament innovation. It is the resolution of a story that runs the entire length of the Bible, and once you see the shape of it, his invitation in Matthew 11 becomes much larger than it first appeared. It begins in the first chapters of Genesis, and it begins with God. On the 7th day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. The Hebrew word is Shabbat, and it does not mean he was tired. It means he stopped because the thing was complete. Rest, in its first appearance in Scripture, is not recovery from exhaustion. It is the posture of someone standing in front of finished work with nothing left to add. And notice what humanity's first full day was. Adam is made on the 6th day, near the end of it, which means the first sunrise a human being ever saw was the sunrise of the 7th day. Before there was any work to do, before a single task had been assigned, the first complete day of human existence was a day of rest inside completed creation. That is the order the whole Bible keeps returning to. Rest first, then work. Not work until you have earned the right to stop. You begin in the finished thing and you work from it. Then that rest is lost. And everything after Genesis 3 is, in one way or another, the story of Cain becomes a fugitive and a vagabond, a man who cannot settle. The nations scatter from Babel. Israel goes into slavery in Egypt, where the defining feature of life under Pharaoh is production without pause, bricks without straw, quotas that increase, a system with no seventh day in it at all. And when God brings them out, one of the 10 words he gives them at Sinai is about stopping. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And the reason attached to it in Deuteronomy is not creation, but liberation. Remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God brought thee out. Keep the day, because you are not slaves anymore. And the way you will know you are not slaves is that you can stop. Then the wilderness, where God offers them entry into the land and calls it in his own words, my rest. And the generation refuses to go in because they are afraid of the giants. And Psalm 95 records the verdict, they shall not enter into my rest. They enter under Joshua, eventually, the land is given. And yet centuries later, David is still writing in the Psalms about entering God's rest as though it was something ahead rather than behind, which the writer of Hebrews notices and builds an entire argument on. If Joshua had given them rest, he says, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day? There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God, and the word he uses there for that remaining rest is a word that appears nowhere else in the Greek Bible or anywhere else in Greek literature that we have, sabbatismos, a Sabbath keeping, a Sabbath rest. He seems to have coined it because no existing word was adequate, so the shape of the story is this. Rest is God's own condition. Humanity begins inside it. Humanity loses it. Israel is given a weekly rehearsal of it, and a land that is a picture of it, and neither the day nor the land turns out to be the thing itself. And the whole Old Testament ends with the promise still outstanding, a nation still restless, and a rest still remaining for the people of God. And then a carpenter stands up in Galilee and says, come unto me, and I will give you rest. Do you see what he is claiming? He is not offering a therapeutic benefit. He is announcing that the thing the entire Hebrew scripture has been reaching for, the rest lost in Eden, rehearsed in the Sabbath, promised in the land, still outstanding in the Psalms, is available in his person to anyone tired enough to come and get it. And the writer of Hebrews tells us how it is entered, in a sentence that ought to be famous. He that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Ceased from his own works, that is the entrance. Not increased effort, cessation. The rest is entered the way God entered his, by standing in front of finished work and stopping. Which is why the 6th word from the cross is the sentence that makes all of this possible. It is finished. Tetelestai, a word written across the bottom of ancient receipts to mean paid in full. The work that you have been trying to do, the securing of your own standing, the earning of your own acceptance, the endless internal labor of trying to be enough, is finished. Not by you. And you cannot rest in something that is still in progress, which is why every religion built on human performance produces tired people, and why the announcement that the work is complete is the only thing that has ever actually stopped anyone. There is one last chapter to this story, and it is at the very end of the Bible. In Revelation, John sees the New Jerusalem coming down, and he hears a voice saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. And a few chapters earlier, he hears a voice from heaven pronouncing a blessing on those who die in the Lord, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. Rest from their labors. The word is anapao, the same word Jesus used in Matthew 11. So the ark closes. God rests in the finished work of creation. Humanity loses it. Jesus offers it in himself, purchased by a finished work on a cross, and it terminates in a city where God lives with people permanently, and the labor is over. You are standing somewhere in the middle of that ark tonight, which means the tiredness you brought into these 4 hours is not a personal failing and not a modern condition. It is the ache of a creature who was made to live inside a rest that was lost, being called back into it by the only one who ever had the standing to offer it. Now to the third to last, saying, and to the place he has gone to prepare. Verse 26. In my Father's house are many mansions. John 14:2-3. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. We promised to come back to this, and now we do, at the point in the study where it belongs. Because ultimately, the deepest rest available to a human being is the knowledge of where they are going. In my Father's house. Notice the word house, oikia, and notice that Jesus does not describe heaven as a location, a state, or a reward. He describes it as his Father's home, and then invites people into it. The primary image of eternity in the mouth of Jesus is domestic. It is family. It is where you live. Are many mansions, monai polai. And here is the detail I have been waiting 3 hours to give you, because it ties this entire study together. The word mone, mansion in the King James, room or dwelling place in modern translations, comes from the verb meno, abide, the same word from John 15. The same word we spent the 22nd teaching on. A mone is literally an abiding place, a place where one remains. So when Jesus says, abide in me, and then says, in my Father's house are many abiding places, he is using the same root deliberately, and he says it in the same conversation, minutes apart. The abiding you begin now, in him, in the middle of an ordinary, tired life, and the abiding place prepared for you in the Father's house are the same reality at 2 different stages. What starts here does not stop. The rest you receive tonight in whatever room you are sitting in is the beginning of a residence. And then the aside, which is one of the most personal things Jesus ever said. If it were not so, I would have told you. That is a sentence about his character, not about heaven. He is saying, I have never given you a comfortable falsehood, and I am not going to start on my last night. If there were no place, I would have said so. You can check my record. I told you about the cross when you did not want to hear it. I told Peter he would deny me. I told you that in the world you would have tribulation. I have never protected you from a hard truth, and therefore you can trust me on this one. I go to prepare a place for you. Hetoimazo, to make ready. It is a word used of preparing a room for a guest, of getting things ready before someone arrives. And there is a wedding image standing behind it that every listener would have recognized. In the Jewish betrothal customs of the period, a young man returned to his father's house after the betrothal and built an addition onto it, and the wedding took place when the father judged the preparation complete, and the groom came for his bride, often at night, often with little warning, which is exactly the sequence Jesus lays out. I go to prepare, I will come again. I will receive you unto myself, and notice the personal pronouns stacking up. A place for you. I will come again, receive you unto myself. He does not send, he does not delegate. He comes. And the purpose clause at the end is the whole point of everything. That where I am, there ye may be also. Not so that you can be in a nice place. Not so that you can be rewarded. So that you can be where he is. The entire architecture of Christian hope resolves, in Jesus' own description of it, into proximity to a person. It is the same answer as Matthew 11, "Come unto me," extended into eternity. And this is the deep rest. Because underneath your tiredness, underneath the worry and the storms, is a question that no improvement in circumstances can answer. Where is this all going? And is there anywhere I finally belong? There is a place. It is being prepared. It is in his Father's house. It has your name on it, in the sense that he specifically went to make it ready for you, and the one preparing it is coming back personally to collect you. Let not your heart be troubled, he said, right before this. Now you can see why the sentence had a flaw under it. Verse 27, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Luke 23:46. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. The second to last teaching in this study is the last sentence Jesus spoke before he died, and it is, of all things, a bedtime prayer. That is not a figure of speech. Psalm 31:5 reads, Into thine hand I commit my spirit. It was, according to Jewish tradition, taught to children as an evening prayer, the words a mother would teach a small child to say before sleep. There is good reason to think Jesus learned it from Mary in Nazareth as a boy, the way children learn such things, and said it thousands of times in a small house in a small town before ever going to Jerusalem. And on a cross, at the end of 6 hours of public execution, after the darkness and the cry of dereliction and the thirst, the last thing he does with his voice is say the prayer he learned as a child before sleep. With one addition, the psalm says, Into thine hand I commit my spirit. Jesus says, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. He adds the word Father. Take in what has just happened in the preceding hours. He has cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? The only recorded prayer in which he does not call God Father. And now, at the very end, the word returns. Whatever happened in that darkness, it is over, and the relationship is not merely intact, it is the thing he dies inside of. Commend is paratithemy. It is a banking word in a sense, to deposit something with someone for safekeeping, to entrust a valuable to a trusted party. It is what you do when you place something precious in hands you believe are reliable and then let go of it. And notice, he was not passive. Luke says he cried with a loud voice and then gave up the ghost, and John records that he said it is finished first. This is not a man whose life was taken from him after he ran out of resistance. In John 10, in the shepherd passage we studied, he said, No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. The death is an act, and the act is entrustment. Now, why is this in a study about rest? For one reason, and it is the reason this whole 4th hour exists, because everything we have talked about for 4 hours, every burden, every anxiety, every storm, every restlessness, comes down finally to the question of what you do with the things you cannot control. And the answer Jesus models, at the most extreme moment any human being has ever faced, is not resignation, and it is not stoicism, and it is not positive thinking. It is deposit into thy hands. Resignation says, nothing can be done, so I will stop caring. Entrustment says, I cannot hold this, so I am placing it into hands that can. Those are entirely different postures, and they produce entirely different people. And there is something worth noticing about the fact that this was a child's prayer. Everything Jesus taught about rest has this quality: the birds who do not have barns, the flowers that do not toil, the sheep who follow a voice, the children whom he set in the middle of a room, and said, Of such is the kingdom. Trust of this kind is not a sophisticated spiritual achievement reached after decades. It is a return to something children do naturally and adults have unlearned. So here is what I would ask you to do with this verse tonight before you sleep, and it is very simple. Take the thing you named in one word at the start of these 4 hours, the weight you carried in, and say the prayer, out loud if you can, in the room where you are, in your own voice. Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And then name the thing and put it in the same sentence. My daughter, my health, this decision, this grief, this debt, this fear about what happens next, into thy hands. You will probably have to do it again tomorrow, because we are all very good at taking things back. That is fine. Do it again tomorrow. The hands do not get tired. Verse 28, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Matthew 25:21. His Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And here, at the last of the 28, is the sentence that everything has been moving toward. The words Jesus says are waiting at the end. It comes from the parable of the talents. In the long discourse Jesus gave in the final week of his life about how to live in the interval between his going and his return. A man travels into a far country and entrusts his property to 3 servants, each according to his ability, and then comes back and settles accounts. 2 of them are given the same sentence, word for word, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Notice, before anything else, what is not said. He does not say, well done, thou successful servant. He does not say, well done, thou impressive servant, thou productive servant, thou servant whose numbers exceeded projections. He says good and faithful. Pistos, trustworthy, reliable, the sort of person who can be depended on. And this matters enormously for the tired person, because faithfulness is available to everyone and success is not. Success depends on circumstances, health, opportunity, the decisions of other people, the economy, the century you were born into, and 100 other things you do not control. Faithfulness depends on showing up with what you were actually given, which is precisely why the man with 2 talents and the man with 5 receive identical commendations. Read it again if you have never noticed. They did not produce the same amount. The 5-talent servant returned 10. The 2-talent servant returned 4. In absolute terms, one produced 2.5 times more than the other, and the master's words to each are word for word the same. If you have spent your life quietly measuring yourself against people who were given 5 and finding yourself lacking, that identical sentence should stop you in your tracks. You will not be assessed against them. You will be assessed on what was in your hand. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, whatever you have been doing that felt too small to count, the caregiving nobody sees, the job that will never be written about, the prayers for a person who does not know you, pray for them, the raising of children in a house where the work resets every single day, is described here as being faithful over a few things, and it is the thing being commended. I will make thee ruler over many things. The reward for faithfulness is not retirement, it is enlargement, which tells you something about the eternity Jesus envisions. It is not an endless absence of activity. It is meaningful work without exhaustion, capacity without depletion, the thing you were made to do without the frustration that has attended everything you have ever done. And then the last phrase, which is the destination of this entire 4-hour study, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Isildi eis ten, charan tu kuriusu, enter into the joy. Notice, he does not say, I will give you joy. He says, enter into mine. The joy already exists. It is his. It has always been his. It was there before the world was made. The joy that was set before him, as Hebrews says, for which he endured the cross. And the invitation at the end is to walk into it, the way you walk into a house where a celebration is already in progress and the noise of it reaches you before you get to the door. Now put the first verse of this study next to the last one, because they are the same sentence spoken at 2 ends of a life. At the beginning, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. At the end, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Come and enter. It starts with an invitation to the exhausted, and it finishes with an invitation into a joy that belongs to someone else and is being shared. Everything in between, the yoke, the birds, the flowers, the boat, the vine, the hand, the bread, the prepared place, is the road between those two doors, and the same voice is speaking at both ends of it. Before we gather it all up, what to actually do with these 4 hours? We are near the end now, and before we go back through the 28 and hold them all together one last time, I want to speak plainly for a few minutes about what happens next. Because the most common thing that occurs after 4 hours like these is nothing at all. You feel something you feel the thing loosen a little in your chest. And then the video ends, and the room is quiet, and within 40 minutes you are back inside the same interior weather you were in before, and by Thursday you could not tell anyone a single thing you heard. That is not a criticism of you. It is a description of how human beings work, and it has been true since long before anybody had a phone. Jesus told a parable about it: seed falling on shallow soil, springing up quickly and dying because it had no root. So let me offer 4 things. Not techniques, 4 ways of staying near what has been said so that it has a chance to go down instead of running off. The first is this: take 1 verse, not 28. You will not remember 28. Nobody remembers 28. But almost everyone who has stayed with this study for 4 hours has had one moment where something went in deeper than the rest, where you stopped and replayed a sentence, or felt something unexpected, or found that your eyes had gone wet without permission. That was not random. That was the one for this season of your life. Go and find it. Write it on something physical: paper, an index card, the back of an envelope, the inside cover of the book beside your bed. Physical, not digital, because digital things get buried under other digital things within a day. And put it where your eyes go without you deciding: the bathroom mirror, the dashboard, the kettle, the lock screen, the place on the kitchen counter where you stand while the coffee brews. Then read it there, out loud, for 30 days. Not as a study exercise, as a returning. The second is this: pray it back. There is an old practice, older than most of our denominations, of taking a line of scripture and simply speaking it back to God as a prayer, slowly, in your own voice, until it stops being a sentence you are reading and becomes a thing you are saying. Take, come unto me and answer it: I am coming. Take fear not, little flock, and reply: I am afraid, and you know it, and I am here anyway. Take into thy hands and name what you are placing there. This is not a formula, and there is no correct wording. It is a conversation, and the only thing that ruins it is trying to perform it well. The third is this: guard the last hour before sleep. I have said very little in this study about practical habits on purpose, because I did not want to hand you a list of things to do about a problem that is not fundamentally about doing. But this one is worth naming, because for an enormous number of people watching, the hour before bed is where the whole day's peace is undone. You know what happens? The house goes quiet, and into the quiet comes the scrolling. And into the scrolling comes an unbroken stream of other people's crises, other people's opinions, other people's highlight reels, and outrage engineered by people whose income depends on your agitation. And then the light goes off, and you wonder why your mind will not settle when you have just spent 40 minutes deliberately feeding it agitation. The men in the boat did not choose their storm. You are, most nights, choosing yours. So take the last part of the evening back. Not perfectly, not with rules that will collapse by Wednesday. Just take some of it. Let the last input of the day be his voice rather than the noise. Put this study on quietly, or read the verse on your card, or say the child's prayer from the 27th teaching. Give your mind something to chew on overnight other than everything it is worried about, because it will chew on something, and you get to choose what. And the fourth is this: do not do it alone. Everything Jesus said in these 4 hours was said to people in a group. Come unto me was spoken to a crowd. The yoke is built for two. The little flock is a flock. The disciples were in a boat together. The vine has many branches. The rest we have been describing is not a solitary achievement, and the enemy of your soul knows that isolated people are easier to exhaust than accompanied ones. So tell one person. Find one human being this week and say out loud the true thing, that you have been tired in a way you have not admitted, that you have been afraid about something specific, that you have not been sleeping. You do not need a professional. You need a witness. And if there is a church near you where the scriptures are actually opened and people actually know each other, go, even if you have been away for years, even if your last experience of church was a bad one. Half the people in the room are carrying what you are carrying and hiding it just as carefully. And I will add a fifth, because it is the one that people report back to me about most often. Build one fixed point into your week where you stop and defend it the way you would defend an appointment with someone important, not a whole day, if a whole day is impossible. Most of the people watching this are not in a position to observe a full Sabbath, and I am not going to hand you a standard you cannot meet and then let you feel guilty about it for a year. But almost everyone can find something, a Sunday afternoon, an hour on a Saturday morning before the house wakes up, a walk after work on a Thursday with the phone left on the counter. The important thing is not the length. It is that it is fixed, that it recurs, and that nothing is being produced during it, because here is what will happen the first few times, and I want you to be ready for it so you do not conclude that it is not working. It will be uncomfortable. You will sit down in the quiet, and within about 4 minutes, you will feel a strong pull to get up and do something useful. Your mind will produce a list. You will remember 3 tasks you had forgotten. The discomfort is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It is the withdrawal symptom of a person who has been medicating with productivity for a long time. And it passes, usually somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd week. And on the other side of it is something most adults have not felt since childhood. An hour with nothing in it that is not being endured, not being filled, and not being justified. That is what the 7th day was for. That is what a desert place was for, and it is the practical shape, in an ordinary week, of everything Jesus has said in these 4 hours. Those are the 5. One verse prayed back in a guarded hour, with one other person who knows, and one fixed point in the week that you refuse to give away. Now let us gather up everything we have walked through and hold it all together, one last time. The 28. Gathered come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. The invitation is not addressed to the strong or the sorted. 2 kinds of tired were named, the exhaustion you produced by trying and the burden that was strapped to you by life, and both were invited in the same breath, on identical terms. The only qualification is being tired. You do not have to arrive impressive, you have to arrive. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. He does not offer a life with nothing in it. He offers a beam that was measured to your shoulders by a carpenter who knows what a bad fit does to a living creature, and he offers to stand in the other half of it. What ends is not the work. What ends is the isolation, for I am meek and lowly in heart. Before you come close, he tells you what you will find when you get there. Strength with its hand off the trigger. A heart that is not defending a position, not requiring you to manage its feelings, not disappointed in you at some level you cannot detect. That is the character at the other end of the beam. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Not undemanding, well-fitted, kind, portable. If your experience of faith has been a load that rubbed your neck raw, that yoke did not come from him. Somebody else made it and told you it was from God. Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while, on the worst week of their lives, after John's execution, after the mission, with crowds pressing so hard they could not eat, the instruction was to withdraw. And when the withdrawal was interrupted by 5,000 people, he rescheduled it to the middle of the night on a mountain rather than abandoning it. Rest that gets interrupted is not rest that gets cancelled. The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Your need to stop is not a design flaw. It was woven into the structure of the world before there was a nation, a law, or a temple by a God who modeled it in the first week. You are not a unit of production, and your value is not established by your output, and the day off is a gift to a creature rather than a tax on one. Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things. The problem was never the cooking. The problem was the fragmentation. A woman in the kitchen whose attention was in the other room and whose heart was prosecuting a case about fairness. He said her name twice, the way you do when you kneel down to meet someone's eyes. One thing is needful. Sit down first. The meal will still get made. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. A dying man distributing his estate, and what he wills to his friends is his own peace, the specific composure with which he was facing that specific night. Not the world's kind, which depends on conditions holding. His, given in a room where the storm was already inside the building. Take no thought for your life, not do not plan. The word means a mind pulled apart, a person scattered across a dozen imagined futures until nobody is left at home in the present. He said it to people with real reasons to fear hunger, which means it is either an insult or an enormous claim, and it is not an insult. Behold the fowls of the air. He did not answer anxiety with a doctrine. He pointed out of a window. Birds work hard and have no barn, no reserve, no mechanism for guaranteeing tomorrow, and they are fed. You have been trying to be your own providence, holding a future no human mind can hold, and it is not your job. Consider the lilies of the field. Solomon's glory was applied from the outside by the finest artisans in the world. The flower's beauty comes from the inside, from simply being what it was made to be, and it wins. God dresses things extravagantly in fields where nobody is watching. You are not required to generate your own worth. Take therefore no thought for the morrow. He does not promise tomorrow will be fine. He says each day has its own trouble. He gives you a boundary instead. Grace is issued with the day, like manna that could not be stored, which is why tomorrow's imagined weight is unbearable. You are rehearsing it without the help that would come with it. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Anxiety is not a lack of energy. It is enormous energy, pointed at what you cannot control. He does not ask you to stop generating. He redirects the target. And your needs are not dismissed. They are reclassified, thrown in, handled by a father who knew what you needed before you asked. The very hairs of your head are all numbered, not surveillance, the attention of love, which is the only kind that bothers with details that serve no purpose. And the sparrow's promise is harder and better than the one we want, not that it will not fall, but that it will not fall without your Father. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. He does not inflate their self-assessment. He tells them they are small and then removes the fear anyway, because the reason has nothing to do with their size. The most valuable thing in existence has already been given by someone who enjoyed deciding it. And once that is settled, every other loss changes category. Peace, be still. He spoke to a storm the way you speak to a barking dog, and a great storm became a great calm of exactly matching size. But the peace was in the boat before the weather changed, asleep in the stern on a cushion while professionals bailed. The composure was always there. They had failed to notice it. Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? Asked afterward in the calm, by a physician rather than a prosecutor. And do not miss verse 35. Let us pass over unto the other side. They were exactly where he sent them when the storm hit. Trouble is not always evidence of a wrong turn. Be of good cheer, it is I. Be not afraid. The fourth watch. 9 hours of rowing against a contrary wind, going nowhere, at the end of every human resource. And that is when he came. 3 phrases. A command they could not obey, a name, and the command again, now possible because of what was placed in the middle. And when Peter sank, the hand came out immediately, and the conversation about his faith happened afterward, from safety. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. Spoken with no gap after Peter was told he would deny him. The comfort is addressed to men who have just been told they will fail, and it does not shrink the trouble. It widens the world around the trouble until there is room to stand. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. The most honest sentence in religious literature, and the most confident in the same breath. He said, I've overcome in the perfect tense on Thursday night, before the arrest, before the cross. Because the thing that looked like total defeat was the mechanism of the victory. I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. The word is orphans. He is addressing the taproot underneath every anxiety we have discussed, not the fear of any specific outcome, but the fear of facing it unaccompanied. He traded proximity for indwelling. He did not go away, he moved in. Lo, I am with you alway, even unto the end of the world, the last recorded words in Matthew, spoken on a mountain to a group that was half worshipping and half doubting, with no separate instructions for each. All the days, not always in the abstract, but every specific day in sequence, including the one on your calendar you keep looking at. Abide in me, and I in you. Not an activity, the absence of departure. There is no such thing as a strenuous branch. Fruit is the inevitable consequence of staying connected. The question is never, what must I do to abide, but what am I doing that constitutes leaving? My sheep hear my voice, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. 2 hands, the sons inside the fathers, and the strongest negation the Greek language possesses. The mark of belonging is not that you never wander, sheep always wander, but that a particular voice registers with you. The security is in the grip, not in the competence of the sheep. If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink, shouted over the climax of the water ceremony on the greatest day of the feast, so that no one could claim they were not included. The restlessness that survives every improvement in your circumstances has an address, and what goes in as a drink comes out as rivers for other thirsty people. I am the bread of life. Not an occasional spiritual luxury, the daily, ordinary, unremarkable substance a life is built from. The promise is not that the appetite is abolished, but that the source is settled, which is what frees your spouse to be your spouse, and your work to be your work instead of asking them to be bread. In my Father's house are many mansions, abiding places, the same root as abide in me, said minutes apart in the same conversation. What starts in you tonight is the beginning of a residence. And if it were not so, I would have told you. A sentence about his track record of never once giving you a comfortable falsehood. Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. A child's bedtime prayer learned in Nazareth, said as the last sentence of his life, with one word added, Father. Not resignation which stops caring, but entrustment which places what it cannot hold into hands that can. You will take it back tomorrow. Do it again. The hands do not get tired. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. The same words to the man with 5 and the man with 2, because you will not be measured against anyone else's talents. Faithful over a few things. The caregiving nobody sees, the work that resets every day, is the thing commended, and the joy at the end is not manufactured for you. It is his, and you are invited to walk into it. 28 sayings, one voice, and every one of them still on the table tonight, in whatever room you are in, at whatever hour it is where you are. If you have never come. There is something I would be failing you if I did not say before the end, and I want to say it gently, because I do not know where you are, and I am not going to assume. Some of you have been walking with Jesus for 40 years and came here tonight because you are tired and needed to hear his voice again. Some of you grew up in church, drifted, and have not thought seriously about any of this in a decade, and something in the title made you click. Some of you have never believed anything and are here because you cannot sleep, and this was quieter than everything else on the screen. Every one of those people has been included in every word of these 4 hours, because every word of these 4 hours came from a man who was notorious in his own lifetime for the company he kept. So if you have never actually come, if you have been hearing all of this as beautiful material about someone else's relationship with God, I want to tell you that the first sentence of this study is not a summary of a religion. It is an offer, and it is open, and it is open right now, at this hour, in the state you are actually in. Come unto me. That was the whole requirement, not get your life sorted and then come. Not understand it all first, not stop being the kind of person who ends up in this condition. Come. And you do that the way you do any honest thing, which is by saying it. There is no formula, and the words do not have to be good, something like, I am tired, and I have been trying to carry all of this myself, and I cannot. I believe you are who you said you were. I believe you died and rose, and that it was for me. I'm coming, take it. That is enough. It has always been enough. The thief on the cross next to him managed considerably less than that and was told that same afternoon that he would be in paradise. And if you did that just now, even quietly, even uncertainly, tell someone this week. Say it out loud to a real human being. Find a church where the Bible gets opened and walk in and tell someone at the door that you are new. Something that is spoken to another person becomes far harder to talk yourself out of by Friday. The 4th watch is almost over. We began 4 hours ago in the last watch of the night, and it is worth ending there. The 4th watch was the hardest shift. It was the one nobody wanted. The hours after midnight had done its worst, and before the sky gave anything back, the cold hours, the ones where the mind turns on itself and old griefs come and sit down beside you and stay. Every culture in every century has known that the human soul is at its lowest somewhere between 3 and 5 in the morning. It is not superstition, it is physiology, and it is old. And it was in exactly those hours that he came walking across the water, not before the storm, not at hour 2 when they still had strength, in the 4th watch. When the rowing had accomplished nothing, and the shore was no closer, and the arms had stopped working properly, and men who had been brave for a long time were finally out of it. I do not know what your 4th watch is. Maybe it is literal, and you are watching this at 3 in the morning because you have not slept properly in weeks, and the house is dark, and everyone else in it is unconscious, and you have been lying there doing the arithmetic on something that has no answer. Maybe it is a season rather than an hour, a year that has gone on too long, a diagnosis you're living alongside, a marriage that has been quiet for a long time, a grief that everyone else has moved past and you have not, a job that is slowly taking pieces out of you, a prayer you have prayed so many times you have stopped expecting anything. Whatever your 4th watch is, hear the shape of the story one more time. He saw them. Mark says so plainly, he saw them toiling in rowing. From the mountainside, in the dark, across open water, at a distance where no human eye could have made out a boat. He was not unaware. The hours of struggle were not unobserved. Whatever else was true, they were being watched over by someone who knew exactly how the night was going for them. He came, not by removing the wind first, which he could have done from where he stood. He came toward them personally, across the very thing that was destroying them, walking on the surface of what they were sinking under. He spoke 3 phrases in the dark, before anything was fixed. Be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. And then Matthew adds, at the end of the account, one detail I have not mentioned until now. When he came into the ship, the wind ceased, and they that were in the ship came and worshipped him. The wind stopped when he got in the boat, not before. The order was the seeing, the coming, the voice, the hand, and only then at the end the calm. So if you are still in the wind tonight, that is not evidence that he has not come. It may be evidence that you are somewhere in the middle of a sequence that has an end you cannot see yet. The fourth watch does not last. That is the thing about it. It is the last watch. Whatever else is true about the night you are in, it is being kept by someone, and it is nearly over, and the one who comes in the darkest hours has never once failed to arrive. A blessing over you before you go. So hear this spoken over you, wherever you are, at whatever hour it is where you are sitting. May the God who rested on the seventh day and was not embarrassed to stop, give you permission to stop. May the one who made a yoke that fits your shoulders take off whatever you have been wearing that never did. And may your neck heal where it has been rubbed raw by things that were never his. May you sleep tonight the way he slept in the stern of that boat, not because the weather is good, but because of who is in the vessel with you. May the words you heard today go down past your mind, where they are only information, into the room where you actually live, where the fear is, and the grief is, and the longing is, and may they take root there and grow into something you could not manufacture. May the Father who counted the hairs on your head and has been paying attention for your entire life, including all the years you were not thinking about him, make his attention felt tonight in some small, unmistakable way. May you be kept in the hand that no force in existence can open. May your thirst find its spring, and your hunger find its bread, and your restlessness find the place it was always looking for. And when your own fourth watch comes, as it will because it comes to everyone, may you hear the voice that has never changed in 2,000 years, saying the same three things it said to frightened men on dark water. Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid. Go and rest now, not the rest you have to earn by first collapsing. The other kind, the kind that is given. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Psalm 4:8. Thank you for staying to the end of these 4 hours. I do not take it lightly that you gave a whole watch of your life to this, and I hope with everything in me that something in it found you where you actually are. Before you close this, I want to ask you for one thing, and it is not for me. Share this video with one person. You already know who. There was a moment somewhere in these 4 hours, maybe during the boat, maybe during the counted hairs, maybe during the child's prayer at the end of a life, when a specific face came into your mind. A friend who has not been sleeping. A brother who is carrying something he will not talk about. A mother who has been running on empty for so long she does not remember what rested feels like. Someone at work who said one sentence to you last month that you have not stopped thinking about. Someone you have been praying for who does not know it. Send it to them, that is the whole thing. You do not need to explain it or introduce it or find the right words. The right words are the ones that were spoken 2,000 years ago and are already in the video. Just send it with something as simple as, I thought of you while I was listening to this. You may never know what it does. That is usually how this works. But there is a real possibility that somebody you love is going to be lying awake tonight in their own fourth watch, and the thing that reaches them at 3 in the morning will be a message from you. And if you have not subscribed, do that too. It is free, it is one tap, and it keeps a seat here for you when the next teaching comes. Then one last thing before you go, and I would love it if you did this. In the comments, Tell us the line or the verse from these 4 hours that you most needed to hear. Not the one that was most impressive, the one that landed. Just type it out. Because somebody is going to scroll through those comments tomorrow at their lowest point looking for a reason to keep going. And the sentence that God used on you today may be the exact one He intends to use on them. Now go, and go in peace. May the Lord, who is Lord also of the Sabbath, give rest to your body, quiet to your mind and stillness to your soul. May He take what you carried in and carry it Himself, and may you lie down tonight and sleep, because He who keeps you does not slumber, and the night is His, and you are held. Amen.